Chapter 882. That afternoon Renbaqian met Qing Lian in the palace again. "Greetings, Your Highness." Qing Lian stepped forward and bowed. "Well, we're acquaintances. Tell me about your purpose." Renbaqian nodded and chuckled. "I heard that you brought hundreds of carriages into the city. Are you here to return the money?" "You're right, Your Highness. I'm here to return the money. I've never forgotten the agreement between you and Su Gong," Qing Lian said. "However, in addition to returning the money, there's one more thing I need your help with. This is a piece of cake for you." "Tell me about it." Renbaqian had some guesses after learning about Qing Lian's team last night. Although he didn't know much about Su Qing's situation in the north, he could more or less guess it. When Su Qing revolted, the people in many prefectures, Great Xia was divided into regions by prefectures, had no way to live. Su Qing swept away millions of refugees, and the two sides fought in full swing, affecting more than just millions of people. Large areas of the people were displaced, dragged into the chaos or busy fleeing for their lives. The discipline of this peasant rebellion was completely imaginable. Wherever they went they would be like locusts passing through. Who was going to farm under such circumstances? If no one was going to farm, they would definitely have to buy food. "Your Highness, in addition to returning part of the promised reward, we also want to buy some food," Qing Lian said respectfully. He. Renbaqian laughed happily, and his unfathomable laughter echoed throughout the hall. "Coming to Dayo to buy food. I can't believe you can think of this." Dayo had been short of food for 10,000 years, and the annual import of food also accounted for a large proportion. Of course, this was 2 years ago. "Your Highness, let's not talk about the fact that the Yun nation is now occupied by Dayo. Dayo itself is no longer short of food and is even rich. If you can lend us a helping hand at this time, we will be very grateful. Besides, if we are defeated, there will be no benefit for you. If we continue to be in a stalemate with the Great Xia court, that is what you want to see the most." Qing Lian straightened up and spoke slowly. Her voice was full of confidence in her own knowledge. She believed that what she said was what Renbaqian wanted. "Great Xia. To be honest, I have no opinion on Great Xia after Xia Baichong died. By the way, do you think I care about Great Xia?" Renbaqian laughed. "I don't care who wins or loses or if you each take a side. I believe Your Highness's words. Controlling the Yun nation was akin to controlling the lifeline of Dayo. Whether it was salt, food, or weapons, they would no longer be able to restrict Dayo. Soldiers had always been Dayo's strong suit. Coupled with Your Highness's wisdom, Dayo has no shortcomings. Perhaps they are only fighting for the right to rule that land for a few decades." She raised her head and stared at Renbaqian without blinking. "I'm not interested in that piece of land." Renbaqian shook his head. This was the truth. He really wasn't interested in that piece of land. It was not easy to occupy, conquer, and rule a country. Whoever did it would know. If it weren't for his bald head, he felt that his hair would have turned white by now, and this was only the Yun nation. In fact, this area was enough for him to play around in. Dayo, together with the Yun nation, was equivalent to 3/5 of China. If it were on Earth, it would be considered a superpower. The endless treasures in the 60,000 mountains and the mineral resources of the Yun nation were all waiting for him to develop. There was no need to forcibly occupy another piece of land, bear the hostility of many people, and have a headache every day in order to eliminate the rebels and appease the people. In fact, Renbaqian wanted to see high-rise buildings, cars, trains, ships, and planes in Dayo. The stark contrast between the feudal society outside the border would be very interesting. Qing Lian could tell that Renbaqian's words were true, but she also understood that people would change. Even if the other party wasn't interested now, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be interested in the future. In any case, there is no harm in having a friendly regime with Dayo. It will also save you a lot of trouble in the future. Qing Lian had a smile on her face. Her prediction of the success rate of this trip was 90%. Therefore, no matter what Renbaqian said, she wouldn't be worried. However, Renbaqian didn't intend to keep her in suspense. He was going to agree to her request anyway. The yield of those high-yield crops was too high. The local crop yield of 300 to 400 caddies per mu had jumped to 3,000 to 7,000 caddies per mu, and there were even 2 crops a year. It was estimated that after the harvest in 2 months, the price of sweet potatoes would drop to 5 copper coins per kilogram. Recently, Renbaqian was preparing to promote cellars and saltpeter to make ice to store these crops. At the same time, he was sorting out the production process of sweet potato wine, sweet potato starch, and vermicelli. If he could sell a batch, it would relieve a lot of pressure. After the harvest in 2 months, it would be the rainy season, and he had half a year to slowly prepare. Let's get down to business. How much money did you bring and how many caddies of food do you want to buy? Rinpoche asked. Qing Lian wasn't surprised to hear this. Your Highness, we brought a total of 15 million taels of gold, silver and jewelry. 10 million taels is 10% of the portion agreed upon by Su Gong and Sir. The remaining 5 million taels of gold and silver will be used to buy sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. Rinpoche calculated in his heart. According to the current market price, sweet potatoes were 3 copper coins per caddy, 30 copper coins per bucket, and 300 copper coins per stone. However, he definitely couldn't sell them at 3 copper coins per caddy. First of all, the market price would be affected. Moreover, many of them had to be transported from other places. Together with the transportation costs, he had to sell them at least at 6 copper coins per caddy. Furthermore, after they bought these high-yielding crops in bulk, they would be able to bear fruit in the region occupied by Su Qing in the second half of this year to next year. In any case, he brought them back from Earth. Did they pay any copyright fees? This was only for sweet potatoes. The price of potatoes and pumpkins was even higher. Rinpoche silently calculated for a while before looking up and saying, I can sell you 1 million caddies of sweet potatoes, 500,000 caddies of potatoes, 500,000 caddies of pumpkins, and 150,000 four-corn cows. In addition, I will send someone to Ping City to deliver them over 5 months. You will have to pay an extra 2 million taels. The price was equivalent to 7 times the current market price. However, the price couldn't be calculated according to the market price. 2 million caddies was equivalent to 100,000 tons. In this era, this was simply an insane amount of transportation. With the current muddy roads, an ox cart generally weighed about half a ton. Based on the calculation of a month's round trip, 5 round trips would require 40,000 ox carts and 20,000 escorts. During this period, the consumption of food would also be a significant figure. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Qing Lian smiled and didn't have any intention of bargaining. In fact, it was already a success to be able to buy so much food here. As for the price, it was the least of their concerns. Most of the time, it wasn't that the more you bought, the cheaper it was, that the more you bought, the more expensive it was. Needless to say, other than Dayo, they simply had no other place to buy food. Rinpoche was already being kind by selling them at this price. He was also considerate enough to deliver the goods to Ping City. Of course, the harvest wasn't small either. 7 million taels was more than the annual income of Dayo's national treasury. Furthermore, this was the first time such a large amount of money had flowed back to Dayo apart from robbery. After settling the matter, Rinpoche could finally ask the questions he wanted to ask. Chapter 883. You're done talking. Next, tell me something that interests me. Rinpoche twisted his buttocks a few times on the couch. To be honest, it wasn't comfortable to sit on this thing at all. The back of the couch was very far away and he couldn't lean on it at all. Next time, it would be better to find someone to make a chair and let people carry it wherever they go. Please speak, Your Highness. How many sword masters are there in the world now? The sword master usually did not fight with others, so it was almost impossible to tell. Moreover, they usually appeared in places where there were few people. Therefore, other than themselves, no one knew how many sword masters there were in the world. In fact, Rinpoche suspected that they didn't even know. About 100 people. Qing Lian was a little uncertain. She then added, between 120 and 150 people. How do you know this number? How many have you seen? Rinpoche immediately looked interested. In fact, there is an organization whose members are all sword slaves. Of course, there are also some ordinary people and cultivators who mainly serve sword slaves. This number was the number that the people in the organization had once said, that there were 110 members. In addition to those who have not been found and those who have just become sword masters, I believe that there are no more than 150 people and no less than 120 people. This was not easy to deduce. Sometimes, 10 sword masters would appear in a year, and sometimes, not even one would appear in several years. There was no pattern at all. Of course, it's also possible that the timeline we paid attention to was too short, so we didn't discover the pattern. If we stretched the timeline to a few thousand years or even longer, we might be able to find a pattern. As for those I've seen, there are only 8 of them, Qing Lian replied after thinking carefully. He immediately thought of the organization that Ning Kaichen had mentioned. What's that organization called? How do I contact him? What does this organization do? Did they look for you? How did they determine your identities? Rinpoche pondered for a moment before throwing out a series of questions. This organization is called Shadow Dream. It said that every leader's spirit sword is Shadow Dream. In fact, Shadow Dream had existed for a long time. It was said that it had survived from the most glorious era of the sword slaves 1,000 years ago. The main thing is for the sword masters to exchange materials with each other. They will also release information about some missions. You can complete missions to obtain materials that you need or the detailed location of certain materials. Ning Kaichen said that this organization had just appeared, but Qing Lian said that it had existed for a long time, at least 1,000 years. The latter's words were more trustworthy. Ning Kaichen might have just come into contact with the organization, so her knowledge was limited. However, in order to attract people to join an organization, shouldn't they first introduce their organization's long history to increase their persuasiveness? This was a little strange. Could it be two different organizations? However, there were only over 100 sword masters in total, so how could there be two organizations? Also, it said that the method they used to determine the sword master is related to the Shadow Dream. Sword master, is there only one organization? Rinpoche asked doubtfully. Since your highness is asking this, it seems that you have come into contact with other sword masters. Is it that Ning Kaichen? In the past there had only been one organization. However, the members of the organization had different beliefs. Some of them held on to the idea that they had always been detached from the world, while others believed that sword slaves should be restored to their former glory. At the very least, they shouldn't have to live in the wilderness from birth to death. He should grasp more power and force others to search for resources for him. These two viewpoints had existed for a long time. 4 years ago they finally split due to some matters. One of them is called Shadow Dream, and the other established an organization called Hidden Dream, Qing Lian introduced. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche finally understood. Ning Kaichen was probably one of the few sword masters who hadn't been recruited before. He had only come into contact with Hidden Dream and not Shadow Dream. According to the timeline, he was found by Hidden Dream after he came to Dayo. Are the people in Hidden Dream inclined to drift away from the world? How many people are there on both sides? Rinpoche calculated in his mind and felt that the latter should be easier to deal with. The former could actually be contacted as well. This group of people was actually divided into two groups. One group had a desire for power that had already taken root in their hearts. These people were unstable factors. The other group wanted to drive ordinary people to help them search for materials. He could completely recruit these people. As long as they could meet his requirements, what harm was there in satisfying their wishes? Rinpoche then learned from Qing Lian about some of the situations that she knew. Among them, Shadow Dream had the most people. There were about 80 of them, and only 7 or 8 of them were at the spirit wheel level. The rest were equivalent to the earth wheel level. Among these people, only a few had a desire for power. Even among the 7 or 8 spirit wheel sword masters, most of them only hoped to find materials more quickly by driving ordinary people. They were also greedy for the prosperity of the world. After all, sword masters were also human, and most people still liked the prosperous world. The loneliness of searching for materials in the wild for a long time was indeed unbearable. However, if they wanted to drive ordinary people or even martial artists, they had to have a certain amount of power. As for Hidden Dream, there were only about 20 people, and 5 or 6 of them were spirit wheel sword masters. What's their contact information? Is your highness very interested in them? In fact, they are just some pitiful people. Qing Lian's tone was slightly sarcastic when she said the latter half of the sentence. At the same time, she was also laughing at herself because she was the same kind of person as them. Indeed. I have a conjecture that I need them to help me verify. Are any of the sword masters that you have come into contact with particularly talented in this area? For example, you. So, your highness has taken a fancy to this ability. Qing Lian smiled slightly and her face relaxed a little. After all, she was the same kind of person as them. So, how does your highness want to treat them? If it's as I think I can reach an agreement with them. They will work for me in exchange for the materials they want. They don't have to stay away from the prosperity of the world and roam the wilderness every day. I can also mobilize enough manpower to search for what they want. There are countless treasures in the 60,000 mountains, and no one except the aboriginals can get their hands on them. What does your highness want them to do? Qing Lian showed a look of interest when she heard this. Perhaps do some research and study the operation of heaven and earth, just like what you learned in school. Perhaps they will become teachers and be responsible for teaching students. The specifics will depend on how far they can go. This is also a good opportunity for them. Whether it is to search for materials in the wilderness or to carry out missions, they will inevitably encounter danger. As long as they use their spirit swords, they will lose their lifespan. However, they don't have to worry at all with me. Qing Lian became even more interested. Great Xia and the previous royal family were tempted by the strength of the sword masters, but they followed the rules and didn't dare to use them. Even if they kept 2 sword masters in private, it was also because of their fighting strength. This was because the sword masters usually looked like ordinary people and wouldn't be guarded against. If they were used for assassination, the success rate was extremely high. However, there was a problem. As long as the sword masters fought, they would lose their lifespan. Ren Baqin wasn't interested in the sword masters' fighting ability, but their talent in learning. This was very refreshing to her. If what Ren Baqin said was true, then it was indeed an opportunity for many sword masters. I hope that you can help me contact some sword masters. You can use your own resources to contact them or issue missions through those organizations. I want to test whether they are like what I think they are. Ren Baqin said. What can they get? The results of this test can be seen in a few months at the latest, and there are no risks. If they don't pass the test, I can send 10 winged cavalry warriors to accompany them into the 60,000 mountains to search for the materials they need. The time limit is 6 months. No matter how much they find, it will belong to them. If they pass the test, they will have to stay in Lan City. I can promise them to choose a rare material as a reward. As for the quantity, it will be increased or decreased according to the value of the material. I will satisfy them. I can go back and try to contact them. Is there a requirement for strength? No. Understood. I will inform Her Highness as soon as possible. If there is any problem, it is that Lan City is a little different from the prosperous world they imagined. Very soon, Lan City will be more prosperous than any city they have ever seen. Ren Baqin laughed. Chapter 884. Qing Lian stayed in Lan City for a week before leaving. She still had to help Ren Baqin contact a few sword masters. As for the others, they stayed in Lan City. After all, Qing Lian could leave the matter of purchasing so much food, but they couldn't. This was related to the lives of millions of people in the Revolutionary Army and the stability of the rear. As long as the food was transported back and planted, a large amount of food would calm the people and completely stabilize the Revolutionary Army in a year. Correspondingly, the people in the areas controlled by Great Xia were still in dire straits. It could be said that these high-yield food were the best trump card against Great Xia. Even if Great Xia could obtain these food and plant them on a large scale, it would take 2 to 3 years. A lot of things could happen during this time. Therefore, they had to pay attention to this food, which was even more important than their own lives. However, less than a week after Qing Lian left, half of the more than 700 revolutionary soldiers were seriously injured, and the other half were lightly injured. The surplus general who led the army had half of his bones broken. Ren Baqin scratched his head when he received the report. At first, only some of the Great Xia people were beaten up. In fact, they weren't the ones who caused trouble. After all, they weren't fools. After all, foreigners were still relatively rare in Lan City. Jing tribe? That was his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. People from the Yun nation? Now, it was also his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. When they heard that they were from Great Xia and that they had a war with Great Xia 2 years ago, some people immediately started to provoke and cause trouble. Then, there was a natural conflict and dozens of Great Xia people were seriously injured. The Aboriginals were experienced in fighting all year round. They knew how to control their strength and didn't kill a single one of them. The most serious one only had about 30 broken bones. General Huaiji was furious when he received the news. Where was the law? Although this was the territory of the Aboriginals, there was no need to bully them like this. He couldn't just be a coward, could he? Would he still be able to be a human when he went back? Then he led his men away. At first, 7 or 8 people ganged up on 30 to 40 of them. When they arrived, it became 70 to 80 people ganging up on 600 to 700 of them. After reading the report, Ren Baqin felt that this group of people was too much. In particular, the people from the Public Order Bureau stood by and watched. Where was the law? Deo was a society governed by law. Well, not yet. When Ren Baqin first arrived, the Aboriginal commoners often fought with the foreign merchants until their brains came out. The punishment was only 3 to 10 lashes of the whip, and they would be able to recover after lying in bed for 8 to 10 days. Ren Baqin rubbed his forehead and went to find the Empress. The Empress was recuperating her pregnancy. The method of recuperating her pregnancy was watching the computer, eating sweets, fruits and alcohol. Ren Baqin still wanted to fight against the Empress's habit of letting go. However, after arguing for 4 days, Ren Baqin put his hands on his waist and gave in. If he continued to argue, he would die before he could fulfill his ambitions. He could only hope that the Empress was strong enough and that the son in her womb was strong enough. It could also be a daughter. In any case, whatever it was, even if it was a ball. Your Majesty. Rinpoche slammed the report on the table. The Empress raised her head and looked at him. Then she leaned back and placed her hand on her belly. With a lazy look on her face she said, "There's another one in my tummy. I can't stand being bullied or frightened." Your Majesty, can't you learn something good? Don't always learn from those things in TV dramas. Besides, who would dare to bully you? You can fight 8 people with one hand. Rinpoche felt that if there was anything worse than an indifferent empress, it would be an empress who had nothing better to do than learn from TV dramas. With your physique you can probably fight 800 people. The empress gestured with her hand. At least 800. Rinpoche added. Aren't you busy right now? What's the matter this time? The empress raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Your Majesty, take a look. Rinpoche sighed. The empress glanced at it and sat back. How do you think I should deal with this? A country has its laws. Rinpoche stated the pros and cons in a deep voice. Your Majesty, things are different now. Not only are the people of Great Xia watching, but it doesn't matter what they think. The Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation are watching to see how you will deal with this. The Aboriginal commoners and officials are also watching to see how you will deal with this. If you let them go this time, they will naturally be more daring in the future. Next time they will still dare to do this. Not only to the people of Great Xia but also to the Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation. The Empress looked at Rinpoche with one finger under her chin and suddenly laughed. When you speak like this, you are actually quite pleasing to the eye. All right, I understand and will give them an explanation. Those who beat people will receive 30 lashes each. The public order officers who were present at the scene at the time will receive 60 lashes each for incompetence. If there is a next time, they will be dismissed from the public order department. As for the people of Great Xia, I will arrange for the medical bureau to treat them. Rinpoche nodded. Such an outcome would be able to intimidate some people. The brains of the Aboriginals were full of muscles and couldn't remember many things for long. However, the public order department should be able to remember everything from top to bottom. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first, Rinpoche said. I'm very bored. Keep me company, the Empress said lazily. Rinpoche calculated that he still had to go to the Ministry of Works in the afternoon and meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. The balance in his heart began to sway. On one hand he placed his work and on the other hand he placed the Empress. Was there a need to choose? I'm a person who works hard for the people, Rinpoche said righteously. Oh, I just realized that today. The Empress looked at him with a faint smile. Compared to the people, Your Majesty is obviously more important. Rinpoche's expression didn't change at all. Forget it, you can go. If you continue to say that, I will feel that I'm an incapable ruler. The Empress waved her hand in frustration. How can that be? Rinpoche sat beside the Empress and laughed. Half a day won't make a difference. Tell me, are you considered a sycophant? The Empress found it a little funny. If Your Majesty is an incapable ruler, I will be a sycophant. If Your Majesty is a wise ruler, I will be a capable one. Rinpoche laughed. After sitting with the Empress for 2 hours, Rinpoche left in a hurry. He sent someone to inform Tong Jingye that he would go to the Ministry of Works tomorrow. He had to meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. Over the past few months, the rearguard commandery had doubled in size. The number of tiki at the bottom level had increased from 2,000 to 4,000. And the number of non-staff called strongmen had increased from 8,000 to 16,000. This meant that there were now a total of 4 Qianhu in the rearguard commandery. Of the original 2 Qianhu, one was in Tianjing Basin, and the other was in the Yun Nation. The 2 newly expanded Qianhu would undergo another 3 months of training. After that, one would be sent to the Yun Nation and the other to Great Xia. The team sent to Great Xia was mainly to investigate the whereabouts of the world's experts, as well as some ancient tombs. According to the traces of the human race after crossing the 60,000 mountains, other than the Aboriginals who stayed in the mountains, the rest should have gone in 2 different directions. One of them was in the direction of the Qin nation, while the majority of the human race went to Great Xia to reproduce. In other words, if that group of people left something in the tombs, it would also be in Great Xia. Moreover, ancient tombs had been occasionally discovered, and each time, some practitioners and even the imperial court would fight for them. The locations were all in Great Xia. Chapter 885. After Qi Jieyu left the villa, she cried bitterly when she got home. She used to think that the scariest thing in life was to fail at everything, to live with daily necessities and all kinds of trivial things in life. She was not even 40 years old, and she didn't even dare to show up at her classmates' gatherings, for fear that others would ask her how she was doing. For a long time after graduation, she felt that she was very lucky. Of course, it was also because of her hard work and talent. However, those days were like a bubble that was burst. She didn't know whether she should hate the person who exposed all of this. Maybe she didn't know anything and she would have lived a good life. However, when she found out that she was living in a fake world, she didn't know how much of what she did, saw, and came into contact with was real and how much was fake. Such a discovery almost drove her crazy. It turned out that the scariest thing was to live in front of a curtain like the world of the Truman Show. During that time, she watched the Truman Show's world over and over again, and every time she watched it, she would cry bitterly. Fortunately, it was finally all over. She was just a substitute, or it could be said that it was only because she was very similar to someone. Since she couldn't make that person let go of her, then she had to find another way. She had to get in touch with him, understand him, and then take revenge on him. Although she was just a substitute could also kill people. The face of the woman she had seen in the past was already blurred in her mind, but she looked very similar to her. The only thing that left a deep impression was that the woman was like a god on an iceberg, looking down coldly. She was ice, so she had to be fire. Only in this way, the complete opposite of her, would she have a chance. In fact, before going to that person, she had prepared herself and began to learn all the ways a woman could attract a man. At the same time, she used all methods to collect information about that person. However, to her surprise, there was very little information about that person, and she couldn't find him on the internet. In this online world, such a thing was almost impossible. If it was an unknown ordinary person, it might be possible. But to live in the real world of the Truman Show and control everything about her, including her clients and her company, how much power did it take? This could only mean that the other party's influence was greater than she thought. After understanding this, her heart was filled with anticipation for the future. There was nothing more delightful than seeing such a person fall in the hands of a doll. After returning from that man's house, she racked her brains every day on how to dress herself up. Although it was only light makeup, not many men like to wear heavy makeup. But for every piece of clothing, the matching accessories, the details of her hairstyle, and the color of her nails, she had to think about it for a long time almost every day. She originally thought that the other party would come in a few days, but she didn't expect that after a few days she would end up disappointed every day. The feeling of waiting for a strange man made her feel weird. She even felt like a commodity. A few days, 1 month, 3 months, half a year. She thought it would take a few days, but she didn't expect to see no trace of him after waiting for half a year. Her imagination ran wild every day, causing her to gradually sink into despair. Did he have no value at all in the other party's eyes? Even this toy couldn't make him look away? Those things that made her unable to sleep at night, the unbearable pain, and the determination, everything seemed so futile and ridiculous. It was just her imagination and a one-woman show. She was still an actress in front of the curtain, showing off everything she had, and being watched and laughed by people below the stage. 7 months passed. At night, Chi Jae-yu put on light makeup and carefully painted her nails, just like she had been doing for the past few months. She put on a clean set of clothes and walked up to the rooftop. She thought of filling the bathtub with hot water and then putting all her blood in it. That way it wouldn't be cold. She also thought of using charcoal. But in the end, she still chose this tragic way of dying. If I fall face down, I won't be able to see my face at all. This is also quite good. Chi Jae-yu thought to herself and looked up at the night sky. There were almost no stars at night in this city. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, Chi Jae-yu looked down at everything that was shrinking under her feet. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then fell forward. However, the feeling of weightlessness only lasted for a moment before it stopped abruptly. Then she felt the world spin around her and her body was thrown back to the rooftop. At that moment, someone rushed over, grabbed her arm, and threw her back. Busybody? Chi Jae-yu thought to herself. However, when she looked up and saw the figure in front of her, she was stunned. His back was much wider than an ordinary person's. Even on a night like this, she could feel the explosive power of his body. Of course, this wasn't what attracted her. Instead, it was the bald head that emitted light at night. The brightness was about 60 lux, which was equivalent to the brightness of a 12-watt incandescent lamp. He turned around, walked to Chi Jae-yu, squatted down, and pinched her chin to carefully look at her. After a while, he let go of her hand and stood up. In fact, he knew that her mental condition was unstable a few days ago. However, due to the time shift, his concept of time was different from hers. To her, 7 months had passed, but to him, it was only a little more than 3 months. Today he took the time to settle some matters and came back to deal with her. He didn't expect to make it just in time. If he didn't know that she couldn't discover his whereabouts, he would have thought that she was deliberately doing this for him to see. "You're fired." Rinpoche looked down at her and said faintly. Question mark. Chi Jiayu looked at him blankly. In fact, when she saw Rinpoche, she threw all her previous plans to the back of her mind. In addition to nervousness, she was at a loss, resentment, and an indescribable mix of emotions. "You're fired. Prepare to find a new job tomorrow. Go to the place you want to go." Rinpoche thought that he would see an ecstatic expression on her face, but it wasn't the case. She seemed to understand what he meant. At first she was puzzled, disappointed, and then couldn't hide her anger. "Isn't this what you want? Judging from your expression, it doesn't seem to be the case." Rinpoche looked down at her. Well, he really couldn't bring himself to like her, mainly because the Empress's divine sense was constantly affecting him and emitting a murderous aura. Should I be deeply grateful? Chi Jiayu was also very surprised. After hearing the news, she felt indignant and resentful. She had thought so much and prepared so much, but the other party simply said, "You're fired." If that was the case, why didn't you say that the last time? If you said that the last time, I would have been very happy to find a new life. Since that was the case, why did you make me wait and prepare for 7 months before getting this result? Since you didn't want to let me go, why did you let me go after thinking for 7 months? However, with that one sentence, everything he had thought, done, and prepared was all gone. His revenge ended before it could even begin. 9 years of his youth had been buried in a void of lies just like that. Although I already knew that I'm just a toy with the same face to the other party, when it really comes to this, I have nothing but anger in my heart. Rinpoche was puzzled, but he didn't want to get involved anymore. Since this matter was over, he turned around and left. Chapter 886. Rinpoche turned his head when he heard the sound and saw the figure leaping into the air. Rinpoche frowned and felt a little angry. "You're going to die in front of me after I let you go?" Rinpoche stomped on the rooftop and moved more than 10 meters away, appearing on the parapet wall. It was 18 stories, more than 60 meters high. Even if he didn't die from the fall, he would be seriously injured. Damn it. This was the only thought that flashed through Rinpoche's mind as he stepped on the wall and rushed down. The feeling of weightlessness enveloped Chi Jiyu's body, and her resentful face became calm. She only had a few seconds left in her life. She tried her best to turn her body and neck to see if that unexpected face would appear above her. However, she saw a scene that she never expected. A figure stepped on the vertical wall and rushed toward her. That big bald head was still shining under the starlight. "Why?" Chi Jiayu moved her lips. At this height, even if it was a human realm expert, he would still die. Even though she knew that the person in front of her was very powerful, she couldn't tell the difference between him and a man-level expert. In her opinion, even if he didn't die, he would still be in great danger. Why did the other party rush down? It only took 3 seconds to fall from more than 60 meters. Rinpoche's fastest speed was 1.5 seconds to cover 100 meters. Rinpoche stared at the ground that was getting closer and closer, and his heart beat faster and faster. It wasn't fear but an inexplicable pleasure. This kind of pleasure made him almost forget what he had jumped down for. Fortunately, when he was more than 10 meters away from the ground, he was finally parallel to Chi Jiayu. He grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. Before he landed, he pushed her up again and adjusted his landing angle. In just 3 seconds, Rinpoche did what most people would take a minute to do. Bang! The moment Rinpoche landed, he felt a strong recoil from the soles of his feet. His muscles bulged and his clothes burst open. Then he felt a sharp pain from his legs, hip bone, and spine. Even though he had practiced the yang boosting technique, his body couldn't withstand such an impact. The only thing he was thankful for was the flower bed below. He was like a nail that was hammered into the ground by nearly 1 meter. After the sound of his landing, there was another sound of objects falling on the car roof and windows shattering. Damn it! Rinpoche's face was full of anger. He wanted to pull himself up from the ground, but he couldn't exert any strength in his legs and hip bone. He reckoned that they were broken. Fortunately, his spine was fine. Damn it, B*Ts, I'm also F*King crazy. Rinpoche had nowhere to vent his anger. His lower body was in severe pain and he couldn't move. He could only curse and vent his anger at himself at the same time. But scolding was just scolding, he really couldn't let her die like this. Furthermore, the Empress was pregnant with another one. If she were to die, What if the Empress's strength increased exponentially? Will it affect the fetus? Even if it wasn't affected, given the Empress's condition, she could turn into longevity heaven at any time. How could she continue living like this? If the Cardinal Heaven experts had to give their all, then the longevity heaven experts could only die. He had thought that if he released her, she would be able to start a new life. He didn't expect that he would seek his own death. If he was going to die, so be it. Why did he have to create so much trouble for himself? Following the sound of Rinpoche getting up and walking, Chi Jayu squatted down in front of him. Looking at him, who was half buried in the ground, Chi Jayu didn't know what kind of expression to make. Why? Chi Jayu finally asked. At this time, Chi Jayu's head was bleeding and her clothes were torn. However, Rinpoche threw her up to cushion most of the impact before throwing her onto the roof of the car. She looked battered, but her condition was much better than Rinpoche's. Slut. Rinpoche didn't have any intention of communicating with her and just wanted to curse. Why did you save me? Slut. I will get someone to capture you and lock you in a cage later. I have never seen anyone risk their life for a toy. Chi Jayu stared at Rinpoche's eyes, trying to see what he was thinking. Get lost. Rinpoche was flustered and exasperated. I thought I was going to die. For a moment I thought you would die too. Chi Jayu slowly said, at that moment I actually didn't feel happy. At that moment, her eyes were filled with the bald man who rushed down from the roof by stepping on the vertical wall. Are you King going to get lost or not? Rinpoche cursed as he pressed his hands against the ground and tried to push himself up. Damn it, he didn't bring the winged cavalry with him this time. However, he brought another person, his new secretary, who had the same background as Shinfeng. And now, that person was still waiting for him on the other side of the building. Who the CK would have thought that such a thing would happen? Chi Jayu was silent for a moment. She watched Rinpoche pull himself out of the ground and asked, do you want to provide for me? This time it was Rinpoche's turn to be stunned. Are you out of your mind? Chi Jayu walked behind Rinpoche and wanted to hug his chest with her hands. Perhaps she wanted to help him pull himself out, or perhaps she had other ideas. Rinpoche waved his hand and threw her 3 to 4 meters away. She only stopped when she hit a car. Stay away from me. Next time if you want to die, stay away. Rinpoche said fiercely. He didn't know what kind of expression he should have and subconsciously used this expression. Chi Jayu sat on the ground. Her skirt was already dirty and torn. She sat there and stared at Rinpoche. Someone will be here soon. When that time comes, they will call an ambulance. Looking at your appearance, you probably won't die. You knew that yourself, so you dared to rush down. However, it's different for me. I will go back to work tomorrow. Come and see me when you have the chance. Chi Jayu didn't try to get close to Rinpoche and just sat there. I have said that I don't need you. Get lost. Don't let me see you again. The veins on Rinpoche's forehead bulged. He felt like his brain was about to explode. How did things turn out like this? Also, was this woman crazy? I will still work there. After all, I am familiar with everything there. Otherwise, I will have to look for you. Why don't you kill me? The corners of Chi Jayu's mouth curled up, making Rinpoche even angrier. While they were talking, someone rushed over from a distance. Although it was the middle of the night, the noise still alarmed many people. Remember, come and see me when you have the time. Chi Jayu said to Rinpoche seriously. She then helped herself up from the car, pushed away the people who rushed over to help her, and limped toward the building. Rinpoche was left there, not knowing what kind of expression to make. Chi Jayu avoided the alarmed people, sat down in a dark corner, and then went into a daze. When the ambulance came and took Rinpoche away, she sat there paralyzed as if she had lost all her strength. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Chapter 887. Wuxia City. Rinpoche stood in front of the window and looked down at this unique city. The city was deserted, but it was gradually becoming more lively. It had been more than a month since his first visit, and the number of people on the streets seemed to have increased. The most direct observation was that there were 9 people sitting on top of a bus that just passed by. The last time he saw it, there were at most 7 people. His injuries from 2 days ago had mostly recovered, and he could at least walk on his own. Black mud cream and bone healing cream were always available in the palace and on Earth. These medicines were very expensive for ordinary people, but they weren't a big deal for him. Behind him was a frosty lady who was as androgynous as Shinfeng. If it weren't for her long hair and more developed chest muscles than Rinpoche's, he could even see her as a man. Rinpoche had to admit that some people could always arrange such an assistant to be by his side. At the very least, there was nothing to question about her resume and ability. However, it had to be said that such an assistant was the safest. If he were to get a beautiful one, Rinpoche couldn't guarantee that she would live for more than half a year. The Empress was sometimes magnanimous, but at other times she was also very jealous. Especially after watching so many TV series. It had to be said that TV series were the root of all evil. This time, the assistant's name wasn't androgynous and didn't match her appearance at all. Lin Xiaoyu. She's back at work. She seems to be in a much better state than before. Lin Xiaoyu's voice was a little hoarse. It seemed like she had been selected from her appearance to her voice. As she spoke, Lin Xiaoyu looked at Rinpoche's back with a little curiosity in her eyes. She knew about Qi Jieyu as Shin Feng had told her about it. As for how they both ended up jumping off a building, she didn't know. However, the hole that Rinpoche smashed gave her a shock. Although it was a flower bed, it was more than half a meter in, and only his legs and hip bones were fractured. This was quite shocking. One had to know that it was 68 meters tall. She was also curious as to why Rinpoche jumped down from there. Just to save that woman? That was surprising to him. From the information she received before coming here, this person in front of her didn't hesitate to kill people. Got it? You can go now, Rinpoche said without turning his head. Should we withdraw the people from the past? Lin Xiaoyu asked with a bit of selfishness. However, Rinpoche didn't care and simply said, withdraw a portion of them and ensure that she's alive. Let her do as she pleases. After Lin Xiaoyu left, Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows. After going around in a big circle, everything had returned to normal. Forget it, if she wants to stay there, then so be it. When Rinpoche returned to Dayo, the Empress revealed a puzzled look the moment she saw him. After scrutinizing him for a while, she frowned and asked, "What happened?" "I found something fun." Rinpoche smiled. "Bungee jumping, Your Majesty, have you heard of it?" The Empress's expression softened a little and she said with some disdain, "Boring thing." Naturally, she knew about bungee jumping, which was to tie a rope and jump down from a high place. The problem was that she wouldn't die even if she jumped down, so why would she think that tying a rope to her feet would be fun? To her, it was even worse than bumper cars. At least there was some skill involved in bumping cars. "I don't know if I can build a platform that's 150 meters high outside the city." Rinpoche was eager to give it a try. When he jumped down from the rooftop that day, the excitement of weightlessness and acceleration was pretty cool. If he hadn't sped down and thrown Qi Jieyu when he was a few meters away from the ground, he wouldn't have suffered such serious injuries. He estimated that jumping down from about 100 meters would be the same injuries he sustained. As for a height of 150 meters, it would be dangerous for an earthwheel expert unless he had specialized in leaping skills. Boring. The Empress curled her lips and ignored him. Rinpoche spread his hands. The Empress wasn't interested, but he was. He hadn't thought about this before, but this time, he suddenly felt that it was quite fun. In addition to bungee jumping, there were also parachuting and hang gliding. He should try them when he had the chance. However, he didn't have the time to build a bungee jumping platform for the time being. The most important thing now was the Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute. Now that he hadn't even used the steam train, it seemed like a big leap to research the internal combustion engine. However, the first gas internal combustion engine was manufactured in 1860, and the first four-stroke internal combustion engine appeared in 1872. Without Rinpoche, someone would probably find a way to reduce the size of the steam engine in 10, 20, or 30 years. However, he couldn't wait that long. With the current manufacturing level, it was completely achievable. The only thing missing was someone proposing this direction. Moreover, the biggest problem limiting the internal combustion engine was fuel, which had been solved long ago. Now, the first batch of sunflowers was about to mature. In 2 months, the first batch of peanuts would mature as well. Rinpoche was going to use biodiesel as the basis for this world's fuel. The next day, a separate small courtyard not far from the school's backyard was officially opened. This was the so-called Internal Combustion Engine Research Center. Every day, in addition to a specific group of craftsmen, there was also a group of senior students in the 4th grade. Graduation in 3 years had been delayed to 3.5 years. This internal combustion engine would be their graduation thesis. In addition to being busy with various matters, Rinpoche also took the time to make a batch of behind-the-scenes footage. This group of simple-minded students had done a lot of the simple-minded things they had done over the past few years, and he had conveniently filmed a lot of them. He was going to show it to them when they graduated. Such a public execution would definitely be a lifelong memory for them. The first movie in Dayo was made up of the black spots of these silly students. "Hey, where's that Ning fellow?" Rinpoche had just finished his lecture and returned to his office when someone blocked the door. The smell of roasted sweet potatoes drifted in. "Oh, you're still thinking about him?" "I couldn't tell. You're old but young at heart." Rinpoche teased. "Nonsense. Do you think I don't know that he's a man?" Then he made him look neither human nor ghost. Li Fu cursed while gnawing on the sweet potato. "Then why are you still looking for him?" "Nonsense. He still owes me money." Li Fu rolled his eyes. "I only look for him when I need it. Who would have thought that he would suddenly disappear?" "How much do you need?" Rinpoche asked with a smile. 30 taels of silver. Li Fu gestured with his fingers. This was the money from their business partnership. He had expended a lot of effort while that fellow sold a few iron trousers. In the end he actually ran away with the money. It was really hateful. "Tsk. Rinpoche exclaimed in admiration. This world's #1 expert was really down to earth for a few dozen taels of silver. Who would believe this? However, Li Fu never had the awareness of being the world's #1 expert. Otherwise he wouldn't have kicked people's testicles every day. "You won't be able to get this money back. He won't be coming back," Rinpoche said leisurely. "However, I have a good job for you. Do you want to hear about it?" "Not interested." Li Fu refused without even listening. He was the world's #1 expert. If he wanted to make money, people would come to his door as long as he opened his mouth. He wasn't interested in doing anything for Rinpoche. As for the 30 taels of silver, it was different. This was his hard-earned money. About the origin of the human race, the causes and consequences, and another vast world. Rinpoche said leisurely. "Oh, you mean those monsters, right?" Li Fu sneered with a look of indifference. "You know about them?" Rinpoche was a little surprised. Chapter 888. Rinpoche had to admit that it made sense for an old man to say that he had eaten more salt than he had eaten rice. This was especially true for people like Li Fu. He had traveled all over the world for 200 years and had been to countless dangerous places, so he definitely knew more than ordinary people. Although the person from back then didn't leave a word or two due to the agreement, many people bypassed that agreement and left some words before they died. The person in the underground palace clearly wrote that the humans were driven here. Although there was no mention of the foreign races, Rinpoche reckoned that the things he left behind actually violated the agreement. The humans weren't allowed to record some of the information he obtained from the herdsmen. As for what would happen if they violated the agreement, if this was on Earth, Rinpoche would definitely say that he would die with his head held high. However, in this world it was hard to say. However, considering his situation, he died with hatred while being driven here. One could imagine the resentment in his heart, so it was understandable that he left behind these things. However, other people might not have been able to leave so many things behind. "How much do you know?" Rinpoche looked at Li Fu and asked. "I know everything I need to know. Back then I accidentally dug up a few ancient tombs and left behind a few words. Everyone left scattered records, and at that time I felt that the key parts were missing. Every few words were missing, and there were other clues left behind. I thought that I would find good things if I continued to search and spent more than 20 years looking for them. I didn't expect to put them together in the end to be like this." Li Fu said resentfully. "If it weren't for this, do you think I would have come here with you? In my opinion, you are all humans. However, in the eyes of others, you are the foreign races." "Accidentally?" Rinpoche laughed. "I can't tell. Look at your thick eyebrows and big eyes." However, what Li Fu said was quite interesting. It seemed that the entire record was broken up by a few people and separated by a few words. If one only looked at one of them, they wouldn't be able to understand what was being said. However, if they were put together, they could be pieced together. This was a more primitive method of keeping secrets, but it was relatively crude. After all, they wanted later generations to figure out what happened. Since the purpose was different, the method was naturally shallow. "Who hasn't been young before?" Li Fu spat with a dissatisfied expression. It seemed like he was regretting that he had wasted more than 20 years just to find these things. "Can you tell me what's written?" Rinpoche asked. Li Fu was silent for a moment, his expression uncertain. Finally he sighed and said, "Now that you know about this, don't tell me you want to go back. Let me tell you, 100 years ago I had the same idea. But now this idea was gone. This was the barren land. The human race had multiplied here for thousands of years. It seemed prosperous, but in fact it had declined by more than a little. The people who left their graves all those years ago understood this. All the records were put together and there were 3 words at the end: don't look back. If we go back, those outsiders will definitely attack us with all their strength. The human race no longer has the experts they once had. How can we resist them? This was a calamity for the human race. This is the reason why I haven't entered the 60,000 mountains for the past 100 years. However, as my lifespan is nearing its end, I decided to go there to take a look. If I can't find a way to ascend to heaven, then I'll wait until my lifespan ends before I find a cave in the 60,000 mountains and end my life there. I don't dare to go because I'm afraid of causing trouble for the human race. With my strength, I'm already the best in the world, but I couldn't even compare to the generals under the emperor back then. Back then, the human race was more than 100 times more powerful than it is now. There were countless experts and I had at least 8,000 of them, but what happened in the end? Even the human sovereign has fallen. Do you really think that no one has discovered these things all these years? It's just that the people who discovered it kept it to themselves and didn't dare to say it out loud. Rinpoche looked at Li Fu and didn't expect him to be like this. He didn't expect him to have such thoughts. However, Li Fu was right. How could no one have discovered it after so many years? Was he smart? Was he lucky? For thousands of years, there were many intelligent people in the world. They didn't dare to go. However, Rinpoche was different from them. They didn't dare to go, but he did. What they were worried about was nothing more than the strength of the outsiders. Fighting here depended on which side had more people and more experts. Their worries were right. The earthwheel experts that Rinpoche saw in that illusion were just soldiers. Now, the Empress's 1,500 winged cavalry warriors were enough to make the whole world afraid, and 10,000 of them could wipe out the 3 nations of Great Xia. However, 10,000 earthwheel experts were nothing in the past. Therefore they didn't dare to. However, Rinpoche dared to. As long as the other party dared to gather an army, Big Ivan would teach them a lesson. There was no need to worry about the other party's intermediate and low-end forces. Even if a Cardinal Heaven expert could escape the explosion of a 10,000-ton miniature nuclear bomb, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape a 10,000-ton nuclear bomb. If that wasn't enough, there was still a 100,000-ton nuclear bomb. At most, the other side of the 60,000 mountains would be covered in mosaic and fall apart. Of course, that would be a method of mutual destruction. Rinpoche was still hoping to go to that land, break through to the spirit will level, break through to the heaven and earth region, and live for 800 to 1,000 years. He lacked nuclear bombs now, but there would always be a way to solve this problem. Therefore, what he lacked the most now was power that could grow into a high-end force. Rinpoche knew that it was useless to persuade Li Fu with words. It was time to let Li Fu see the effects of nuclear weapons. This was much more useful than words. I'll show you something in 7 days. I'm sure you will have a new idea. Li Fu looked at him, shook his head and said, "You probably don't know that when one's strength reaches a certain level, all external things are a joke. In some ways you're right. However, what you're afraid of is that they have the strength to wipe out the human race. If I show them that I have the strength to wipe them out, would they dare?" Rinpoche chuckled. Of course they wouldn't dare. If nuclear bombs plowed that land, apart from those top experts, the ordinary people of the foreign races wouldn't be able to survive. Would they be able to create another race? However, it was impossible to rely on this method to allow the human race to occupy a place in that world. Nuclear bombs could only be used as a weapon of destruction and not as a weapon of deterrence. Otherwise, they would have to spend a few years or decades to fully understand the situation of nuclear bombs or simply destroy them. At that time, the human race wouldn't even have a place to run. Therefore, the purpose of this thing was to directly plow over after the war started and bomb wherever there were many people. Li Fu carefully stared at Rinpoche for a long time before asking, "Are you dreaming?" "You will know in a few days. I can also give a lesson to the students at the academy. I want to see what you can come up with," Li Fu said with a strange look on his face before disappearing in a flash. Rinpoche leaned back in his chair and touched his chin. He currently had a miniature warhead with a yield of 200 tons. However, this thing could scare others, but it wasn't enough to scare Li Fu. It was best to make it more intuitive and give people confidence immediately after seeing it. If the power wasn't enough, he could make up for it with the yield. With his strength of more than 1,000 kilograms, he should be able to bring back a warhead with a yield of 10,000 tons, right? Chapter 889. What are you looking for? You have been gesticulating non-stop since you came back. The Empress held the roaring emperor with one hand and picked up a fruit with the other, throwing it at Rinpoche, who was gesticulating on the map. Other people held their pets, but the Empress held them by their necks. The roaring emperor seemed to be enjoying it. "I brought back a big guy this time." Rinpoche looked back at her and continued to look at the map. Oh, didn't you say that before? The Empress let go of the roaring emperor, and it rolled on the ground. It then rubbed itself against her feet, trying to dig a hole. This was a subconscious action. A mole that didn't dig a hole was like a monkey that didn't climb a tree. However, the Empress was quick enough to kick it aside. If you dig another hole, tomorrow's dinner will be yours. The roaring emperor quickly ran away. That's why I have to find a place to blow it up. It doesn't feel safe to keep this thing around. However, it's not easy to find this place. Can it blow up Lan City? The Empress asked curiously. She had been curious about the power of nuclear bombs ever since she saw a documentary on Earth. However, she had only seen the 2 miniature nuclear bombs that Rinpoche threw, which were powerful enough to blow up half of the palace. Therefore, she was very curious about the size of the big guy that Rinpoche was talking about. I'm afraid that 4 Lan cities will be blown up. Rinpoche laughed bitterly. He didn't expect the country to be so ruthless. The last 3 were miniature nuclear warheads, but this time they actually got him a real deterrent nuclear warhead. The reason was that it was about to expire. Of course, that wasn't what they said at the time. The veins on Rinpoche's forehead bulged when he thought of this reason. *CK they gave me a nuclear warhead that was about to expire? Moreover, it was said that there were quite a lot of them. Since destroying them was destroying them, they gave him one on account of his honesty. He had to admit that the big shots this time were really bold. 475,000 tons. The 2 nuclear warheads that the United States threw at him added up to about 30,000 tons. The one that he was holding now was 15 times the size of those 2. Not to mention using it to scare Li Fu, it was enough to scare himself. More importantly, this thing was about to expire and there was no telling if there would be any problems. Alright, that was quite a long time. Half a year. And he was prepared to pung it in the next few days. However, it wasn't that easy to trick Peng. First he had to find a deserted place. It would be best if there were only a few living animals. He didn't want to create any monsters due to radiation contamination. It would be easier to deal with Godzilla, as any Cardinal Heaven expert could easily kill it. That thing was just a little brother. However, the dire beasts in this world were powerful to begin with. If they were to mutate, it would be troublesome. For example, the 2 bombs in the 60,000 mountains were relatively weak. Moreover, he had ordered people to keep a close watch on the area and forbid any ferocious beasts from roaming about. Therefore, there shouldn't be any major problems. But this time it was really too big. In addition to being deserted, it also has to be large enough. The best would be a desert, but there were no deserts in Dayo. He couldn't bear to blow up the grasslands and pastures. The Empress was shocked to hear that 4 of Lan cities had been destroyed. She asked incredulously, "It's actually that powerful? We do not dare to casually hand over such a thing to others." I didn't expect it either. Rinpoche smiled bitterly. He originally thought that a bomb with a yield of 10,000 tons would be enough. The radius of the direct destruction would be 1 kilometer, and the area of destruction would be 4 square kilometers. Of course, the impact area would be larger, reaching 10 square kilometers. The radius of the direct destruction of this 475,000-ton warhead would reach 5 kilometers, which was 25 square kilometers. In other words, the high light and heat during the explosion would directly ignite everything in this area. The impact area would be even larger. Needless to say, the radiation range would be dozens of times larger, so Rinpoche had to be cautious. Rinpoche looked at the map for a long time and drew circles in a few places. He then sat back at the table and began to write a letter. Li Yuanzhu? The Empress came over to take a look, and her face immediately turned ugly. It would be a waste not to bring more people to watch such a big nuclear bomb. Rinpoche said without looking up. Among the top 10 experts in the world, the second most powerful expert, Su Wuming, has been in hiding for a long time. He has always been secretive and unpredictable. Forget about this kind of person. Li Yuanzhu is the third most powerful expert in the world, a rather decent person and can be used. If she takes the lead, a lot of things will be easier to handle. The fourth most powerful expert is you, Your Majesty. The fifth most powerful expert is Jiang Zixi, who used to be the sixth most powerful expert in the world. This person has a good reputation and I will also send someone to invite him. However, he is the chief of the Huabing Sword House, so I may not be able to invite him. The sixth most powerful expert is Hong Wu, and the 7th to 10th are all thanks to Your Majesty. Rinpoche laughed at this point. The Empress had killed many experts in the past few years. The fourth most powerful expert in the world, Ting Yu, the fifth most powerful expert, Hua Sanlu, the 7th most powerful expert, Lu Pinghai, and the Zhumu elders, who were killed by the Empress when they were just promoted to the 10th most powerful expert in the world. Although the embroidered uniform guards from the rearguard commandery hadn't been sent out yet, there was no need to collect information on these top experts. They could easily find out by asking. The 7th most powerful expert is Tong Yin, who used to be the 12th most powerful expert in the world. He is a treacherous person and can't be used. The 8th most powerful expert is Ma Hongyu, who used to be the 14th most powerful expert in the world. Although he isn't good or evil, he is famous for keeping his promises. Although he has a villa, it will be easier to invite him than Jiang Zixi. The 9th most powerful expert is Su Gongso, an elder of the Moon Palm sect. He is known as the Sun, Moon and Heaven and Earth Palm and has a decent reputation. The 10th most powerful expert is Lin Dong, the chief of Jingtian sect. This sect is called Jingtian, but it specializes in evil practices and has a bad reputation. However, this Lin Dong, although he is irritable and bloodthirsty, he is a man of his word. I can get in touch with him. None of these people are easy to invite. In what name? The Empress curled her lips. In the name of the world's most powerful expert, Li Fu, of course. Just say that the secret residence of a deity from ancient times is about to appear. He can't handle it alone, so he is inviting everyone to help him. After it is opened, the treasures inside will be obtained by those who are fated. Rinpoche had read a lot of Xianxia novels back then, so he had a lot of such plots in his mind. If someone else had said this, those people might not have taken it seriously. However, if Li Fu said this, most of them would probably come and take a look. If they find out that they have been deceived, I won't be able to stop them by myself. When the time comes, a nuclear bomb will open the way and everyone will probably be able to sit down and have a good talk. Rinpoche wasn't worried at all. However, this isn't what you wrote in this letter. The Empress looked at it and raised her eyebrows again. Li Yuanzhu is too indifferent. Fame and fortune can't move her. Previously, when a secret treasure appeared near her mountain, she didn't do anything. For such a person, you have to persuade her with righteousness. Rinpoche laughed. On the paper he wrote, the human race is in danger. The foreign races are making a comeback with great power and are unstoppable. We will discuss this matter in Lan City in 2 months. Signed, Li Fu. The letter to Li Yuanzhu was to ask her to come to Lan City. After convincing her, he could rely on her and the Empress to suppress the others. The letter to the others was to tell them where he was going to detonate the nuclear bomb. His handwriting is really ugly. The Empress commented. That's right. With Li Fu's background, I don't believe that his handwriting is good-looking. Rinpoche laughed. Besides, no one would have thought that someone would dare to impersonate Li Fu with such ugly handwriting, right? That's why it's so believable. The next day, when Li Fu heard that Rinpoche had changed the time to 2.5 months later, he sneered and said, "You usually have a glib tongue, but you can't take it out now, can you? We will know in 2.5 months. Rinpoche didn't care at all and chuckled. Chapter 890. The Genuine One sect was originally an inconspicuous small sect, but ever since Li Yuanzhu appeared, its doorstep had been broken by people every day. There were many people who wanted to see Li Yuanzhu, but very few were able to see her. On this day, a fast horse stopped at the foot of Bamboo Mountain. A young man with a broad forehead dismounted from the horse and placed it in the pit. This pit had long been in place for fear that someone would ride a horse up the mountain and startle the pilgrims. However, before Li Yuanzhu was born, who would care about this? Now, how many people dared to ride a horse? There was a Taoist temple on the mountain that wasn't considered big. Compared to the third most powerful sect in the world, it could be said to be shabby. However, there were many pilgrims and even more people who wanted to learn from the temple. The young man sized it up and set his eyes on a 16 or 17-year-old Taoist who was standing in front of the door not far away. "Fellow Taoist, I have a letter to deliver to spiritual master Li Yuanzhu. Please pass on the message," the young man said politely and with proper etiquette. Although Li Yuanzhu was dressed as a Taoist nun, she wasn't really a monk. However, the young man still addressed her as spiritual master. "I don't know your name. Just pass the letter to me." The little Taoist smiled. He muttered in his heart. Every day there were countless people who wanted to see Marshal Granduncle and deliver letters to him. Although this was what he was thinking, he could tell from the little Taoist's attitude that Genuine One sect was good at disciplining its disciples. "My name isn't important, but the person who asked me to deliver this letter isn't ordinary. I dare not fake it. Fellow Taoist, please pass on the message that a person named Li Fu wants me to deliver a letter to spiritual master Li Yuanzhu." What a tacky name. The little Taoist muttered in his heart. He had never heard of such an expert. There were many people in this world who thought highly of themselves. In fact, outside of the surrounding villages, there were only a few who had heard of their names. Even if that person arrives at the palace, the emperor will personally welcome him. Whether it's true or not, you will know after you pass on the message. The young man seemed to know what he was thinking. In fact, the young man had also thought so. If he hadn't accepted this task, he wouldn't have heard of Li Fu. Even though the little Taoist felt that he was boasting a little too much, he could see the certainty in his words. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. He paid his respects and hurriedly went in to report. This young man was called Shi Jingtian, and he was one of the most talented disciples in the Lingshan sect in Tianjin Basin. At the age of 19, he had attained the earth wheel level and became Zhuo Cheng's personal disciple. More than half of the sects in Tianjin Basin had already been annihilated. The Lingshan sect was the leader of the 8 biggest sects in Tianjin Basin. In the past 2 years, it had recruited many disciples, and its strength had greatly increased. Now that the spiritual mountain sect and the rearguard commandery were tied together, they had even sent out such a disciple. After the little Taoist priest left, Shi Jingtian secretly observed the situation of the True One Temple. Li Yuanzhu was in the quiet room at the moment. In fact, she spent most of her time here. Everyone thought that she trained hard every day. Otherwise, how could she have become a top-notch expert in the world at the age of 20? However, she was peeling 7 leaves. They were only the size of a thumb and had a hard outer shell. After breaking them open, the red skin and white flesh were revealed. It was troublesome for ordinary people to eat these 7 leaves, but Li Yuanzhu could break them open with a gentle pinch without hurting the red skin at all. Just this skill alone was enough to make people cheer. At the moment, there was already a small pile of 7 leaves at the side, and in front of her was a small pile of separated nuts. She gently picked one up with her slender hand and put it in her mouth. There was a hint of joy on her delicate and indifferent face. At this moment, hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. The joy on Li Yuanzhu's face froze slightly. She brushed her hand on the couch and the shells and nuts disappeared without a trace. "Senior sister, someone wants to send you a letter." He boasted that even the emperor will personally receive him when he reaches the palace. A young girl in her 20s who exuded a youthful aura pushed open the door and shouted. She then sniffed and asked with a suspicious look, "Senior sister, did you secretly eat again?" "Why would I?" Li Yuanzhu smiled. Ning Qing's nose was getting better and better. Her innate talent was probably in her nose. She reprimanded gently, "You're not young anymore, yet you're still so rash. What's the person's name?" "Don't change the topic. I can smell it. You know this nose of mine. Even a dog can't compare to me." Ning Qing was certain that Li Yuanzhu had eaten secretly. "Senior sister, you're so cunning. The last time I asked you, you said you didn't have any. How dare you hide and eat secretly? What exactly are you doing here?" Li Yuanzhu asked helplessly. She couldn't help but think that Ning Qing was probably the only one who could come up with such a strange metaphor. She had never thought that even a dog couldn't compare to her. Wasn't she scolding herself? "Oh, forget it. I'll let you off this time. If people find out that the 3rd most powerful expert in the world hides and eats secretly like a thief, they'll probably laugh their heads off." The young girl nagged for a long time before saying, "Someone sent a letter and said that it was sent by Li Fu. He also said that the emperor will personally welcome the owner of the letter when he arrives at the palace." "Who is this Li Fu? Why haven't I heard of this name before?" Li Yuanzhu was stunned and looked a little surprised. "I've never had any contact with him. But if it's really him, I have to take a look at this letter. I just hope that it's not someone impersonating his name. Who exactly is this Li Fu? What an old-fashioned name." Ning Qing was even more curious when she saw Li Yuanzhu's reaction. "The world's #1 expert. He's the only one with this name who can be personally welcomed by the emperor," Li Yuanzhu said faintly. "I've told you before." "Ah, so it's that person with the name XXX. Ning Qing suddenly realized. Li Yuanzhu had a smile on her face. This matter was indeed interesting. The top 2 names in the list of world experts were replaced by XXX and had always been treated as a joke. However, the real top experts had more or less heard of these 2 names. One was Li Fu. The other was much more impressive, sword maniac Su Wuming. He was a figure from hundreds of years ago and had been in hiding for a long time. Not many people knew whether he was dead or alive. She didn't expect to receive a letter from Li Fu. "Bring him to the guest hall. I'll go after a while," Li Yuanzhu said slowly. After Ning Qing left, Li Yuanzhu found a box in the quiet room and put all the 7 leaves nuts into it. The box looked inconspicuous, but it was actually made of a type of Wuchang wood. Its function was to keep the items inside for several months without rotting. It was extremely expensive. Such a small box cost more than 100 taels of gold, and it was usually used to store precious herbs. However, to Li Yuanzhu this box was a snack box. Not only could it keep the food fresh, but it could also prevent Ning Qing from finding it. Shi Jingtian was brought into the guest hall. He didn't look around and just stood there quietly. "Kid, what's your name? Is this letter really written by the world's #1 expert, Li Fu? Is he still alive? Where is he? Are you his disciple? Why did he write a letter to senior sister? Hey kid, say something. Don't tell me that the letter in your hand is fake? It doesn't make sense for him to suddenly appear and send a letter after disappearing for so long. Let me tell you, if it's fake you better tell me quickly. Otherwise, when senior sister comes later, I won't let you off even if she doesn't say anything." A young girl sat at the head of the table and kept talking with a curious look on her face. Shi Jingtian pretended to look down and turned a deaf ear to her. "You're not a mute, are you? Or are you looking down on me? Let me tell you, in our True One temple, senior sister is the eldest, the temple master is the second, and the martial uncles are the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The last one is me." Shi Jingtian continued to look down, but the back of his head was already sweating. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer, but he really didn't know where to start. "Women are really scary. I was right to reject junior sister a few days ago. Studying and practicing martial arts are more important." Fortunately, after waiting for a while, someone finally came to his rescue. Chapter 891. Senior sister, you're here. This person is a mute. Someone actually sent a mute to deliver a letter. Ning Qing immediately jumped up from her chair and scolded her. "I'm afraid that a normal person would become mute in front of you," Li Yuanzhu said helplessly. Normal people tended to talk less as they aged. Ning Qing was the opposite. Now that he thought about it, Ning Qing was cuter when she was young. "May I ask if you are perfected Li Yuanzhu?" Shi Jingtian coughed lightly. In fact, when he first saw this girl he was sure that she was exactly as the rumors said. He couldn't help but think, it would be great if all the women in the world were like her. At least it's not that annoying. Please take a seat. How should I address you, young master?" Li Yuanzhu's smile relaxed Shi Jingtian. This was the first time he was so relaxed in front of a woman. Usually they feared it like a tiger. It just so happened that he was talented and good-looking. Who knew how many people gathered around him every day, causing him to be unable to bear it. "I am Shi Jingtian." Shi Jingtian cupped his fists and bowed. He then took out a letter and said, "This is the letter. So it's young Master Shi. You're young but your cultivation level isn't low. Your talent is truly amazing," Li Yuanzhu praised. Shi Jingtian was startled. Ever since he had arrived at this Taoist temple, he had not revealed a single bit of his aura. He did not expect that the other party would be able to detect him. But thinking about it, this was to be expected. Even his master was not a match for this woman in her prime. Ning Qing ran down, snatched the letter, and handed it over to her. Li Yuanzhu smiled and said, "Who is the person who asked you to deliver the letter? What does it have to do with you?" "It's Prince Xiao," Shi Jingtian replied honestly. In fact, Rinpoche had already instructed him not to hide the fact that Li Fu was in Lan City. Furthermore, the meeting place in the letter was Lan City. If it was secretive, it would make people suspicious. Li Yuanzhu pondered for a moment and was slightly surprised. "So it's Zhao, Prince Consort of Deyo. Ah, that gigolo?" Ning Qing finally reacted. "Ning Qing." Li Yuanzhu pulled a long face, scaring Ning Qing. She quickly said, "I was just spouting nonsense. Don't mind me." "Why is that senior in Deyo? What is he doing in Deyo?" she asked slowly. "I do not know. Once you read the letter you will roughly know," Shi Jingtian said. She opened the letter and frowned after taking a glance at it. The content of the letter was rather strange. "Outsiders? Make a comeback? Powerful? What does that mean? What an ugly handwriting." Ning Qing couldn't help but say as she glanced at the back of the letter. This time, Li Yuanzhu didn't reprimand her. She wasn't concerned about the beauty or ugliness of the words, but the meaning behind them. In her eyes, every word turned into a towering mountain. The number of words on the letter represented the number of mountains. "There's also the scent of a woman." Ning Qing sniffled and said suspiciously. This letter was naturally written by the Empress. Every word of such an expert had its own spirit. No matter how similar Rinpoche's words were, An expert would be able to tell the truth with just one look. After the Empress raised this point, Rinpoche immediately thought of her. She felt that it was rather interesting to fool around with that woman, so she helped him. Although the Empress wasn't Li Fu, she was the fourth most powerful expert in the world and the Empress of a nation. She had her own spirit. If one hadn't seen their handwriting before, one would really think that it was written by the world's most powerful expert. It was only a few dozen words, but it took Li Yuanzhu 10 minutes to read before she put down the letter and praised, "Good handwriting." Ning Qing was still surprised by the content of the letter, but her eyes widened when she heard this. "Good handwriting? I told you to cultivate well, but you are too weak to see it." Li Yuanzhu shook her head and asked, "Does young Master sure know what the content of this letter means?" "I don't. Is that person in Lan City? Can you tell me about his current situation?" Li Yuanzhu asked. The content of the letter made her feel strange, but it reminded her of something she had heard from Su Gongso. At that time, Su Gongso didn't explain it clearly, and in fact he didn't understand it either. However, the history of the human race contained a huge secret. When Li Yuanzhu saw this letter, she first confirmed that it was indeed written by Li Fu. There were probably only two people in the world who could write such words, Li Fu and Qi Zixiao. The latter disdained to do such a thing. In that case it could only be Li Fu. It seemed that no matter what, she had to make a trip to the south to understand the situation. But before that, she still wanted to ask about Li Fu's current situation. Shi Jingtian hesitated for a while and said, "I don't know much. Just tell me what you know." The whereabouts of the world's most powerful expert has been a mystery for a long time, so I'm still a little curious. Li Yuanzhu smiled. "I know that he has a nickname, the balls-kicking maniac." "What? What does that mean?" Li Yuanzhu didn't quite understand. Shi Jingtian said, "It is said that after he arrived in Lan City, many experts challenged him. No matter who it was, he kicked all of them in the crotch, so he got the nickname of the balls-kicking maniac." Ning Qing spurted out. Li Yuanzhu's expression froze. Shi Jingtian's heart was filled with malice when he saw their expressions. He had experienced the feeling of having his idol destroyed before. Then he said in a carefree manner, "It is said that he colluded with someone to sell iron crotches. If you buy iron crotches from that place and challenge him, he will kick you more gently." "This is the world's most powerful expert? Are you kidding?" Ning Qing's eyeballs almost popped out. "Senior sister, this must be fake, right?" Ning Qing couldn't believe that the world's most powerful expert was like this. Li Yuanzhu rubbed her forehead and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "According to the rumored character of that person, it's not impossible. That's all I know." Shi Jingtian was quite happy. "Young Master Shi, are you from the Yun Nation or Tianjing Basin?" Li Yuanzhu asked again. "Tianjing Basin Lingshan sect." "Oh, you're from the Lingshan sect." Li Yuanzhu nodded and asked, "Are you working for the Dayo Imperial Court now?" "Yes. As a Baihu from the Rearguard Commandery, I've taken on the responsibility of delivering the letter," Shi Jingtian said truthfully. "I see. Young Master Shi, please take a rest. I'll give you a reply after thinking about it," Li Yuanzhu said. After Shi Jingtian left, Ning Qing asked the question in her heart, "Was it really written by Li Fu? What does this letter mean? What foreign races? Senior sister, do you know?" "I'm not sure, but since it's written by the world's most powerful expert, it must be true. No matter what, I have to make this trip." "I'll go too." Ning Qing immediately jumped up and said excitedly, "I'll go pack my luggage now. I've been bored on the mountain for a long time and I can finally go out for a walk." "You." Li Yuanzhu shook her head helplessly. "If something really happens, I can still deliver a letter or something. Furthermore, you're the world's third most powerful expert. If you don't bring a few people with you, you'll lose your prestige. Although you don't care, you can't let others look down on you. Besides, with me, you'll have someone to talk to along the way." Ning Qing chattered. Li Yuanzhu smiled bitterly. With her talent, if she was willing to work hard, it wouldn't be a problem for her to reach the earth wheel level before the age of 20. However, with her jumpy personality, she couldn't settle down and was only at the later stages of the man wheel level. Bringing her out to see the world this time might be able to sharpen her temper. Chapter 892. Let me ask you something. You and Su Wuming are both from 100 years ago. According to the lifespan of spirit wheel experts, there shouldn't be only two of you from 100 years ago, right? Why are the people on the list of experts from recent decades? Don't tell me that those from 100 years ago are useless. Rinpoche had nothing to do, so he dragged Li Fu to the barbecue rack. There was a row of people hanging 5 meters above the rack. Those who didn't know better would think that he was barbecuing people. The aroma of the barbecue and the smoke made the teenagers on the rack almost cry. "Principal, will you let me down? I'll definitely pass next time." Zhu Hua vowed. "Ha." Rinpoche's mouth twitched. "Have you ever passed in these few years of school? Forget it, I don't have any expectations for you to pass. You can be a security guard after graduation." Li Fu mimicked Rinpoche sprinkling seasoning on a large skewer of lamb and said, "They are all dead." Rinpoche was shocked and turned to look at Li Fu. "All dead? All the experts from that era are dead? How did they die?" With a spirit wheel expert's lifespan of about 150 years, there weren't many experts from 100 years ago. There weren't even experts from 70 or 80 years ago. This made him curious. After so many years, it was normal for a few people to die because of fights, revenge, or other reasons. However, all of them were dead, which made this matter strange. Su Wuming killed them. Li Fu said faintly. "It's him? What? If he saw you, he would have killed you too." Li Fu added. Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows. According to Li Fu, if they wanted to kill him upon seeing him, there could only be one reason. Could it be that those people were killed because they wanted to go out and take a look? Yes. Li Fu recalled. Back then, there were still many experts. When we discovered that information, some people couldn't help but contact other experts to go and take a look. Later, Su Wuming passed away. Was Su Wuming that strong? Rinpoche asked. "I couldn't beat him back then," Li Fu said. "He was seriously injured that time, and I don't know if he has recovered after so many years. However, I became the world's #1 expert." Rinpoche was silent for a while before laughing. "Sword maniac? Ah. You don't know how terrifying that thing was." Li Fu shook his head. "If you really want to go, I will stop you." Even if he had to gasp for breath here, it was still better than a bloody river. At that time, I'm afraid I won't be able to see anything in this world anymore. As the two of them spoke, the students above stopped making a ruckus. All of them pricked up their ears. "I will show you something that will scare you to death in 1 month." Rinpoche sneered. "Let's wait and see." Although Li Fu said so, he obviously didn't believe it. "That's right, old man, I also called some people over. Li Yuanzhu and a few other experts. When the time comes, I'll let all of you watch a grand scene together. It has nothing to do with me." Li Fu did not care at all. "Relationship? Still a little?" Rinpoche chuckled. "I invited him in your name. You won't be able to invite them. An expert will be able to tell if it's real or fake at a glance." Li Fu suddenly thought of something as he said this. He looked surprised. Could it be written by the little girl? She actually did such a thing? "I'm her husband and she's my wife," Rinpoche bragged. "Isn't it just writing a letter?" Li Fu sneered. "Your Majesty, Invincible East is the only one. It's just the right time to capture them all in one fell swoop." Rinpoche said casually. "I'm afraid that all of you will die." Li Fu obviously didn't believe this nonsense. The little girl was powerful, but she was talented. It was indeed rare for her to have such strength at such a young age. In a few more years, it wouldn't be impossible for her to surpass Rinpoche. However, it wasn't that there weren't people who were stronger than her now. At the very least, Li Yuanzhu wouldn't be weaker than her. With her blocking the Empress, even though there were many experts in Dayo, they wouldn't be able to stop the top experts. They might even take advantage of the situation and kill many of them. Why would the little girl do such an unwise thing? You will know when the time comes. Speaking of which, you really don't have any objections to me using your name? Rinpoche began to feel strange. This old man was too calm. If they come and I explain the matter to them, they can only blame themselves for being stupid. Can they still blame me for it? Li Fu sneered. How magnanimous. Rinpoche gave a thumbs up and praised. I'm waiting to see what you'll do when the time comes. If you mess it up, you'll lose the face of the entire imperial court. That little girl won't let you off either. Li Fu sounded like he was waiting to watch a good show. Also, no matter what, be careful of Su Wuming. If he knows what you are thinking, the little girl won't be able to protect you. As for me, don't expect me to stop him for you. What's the point of going out if I can't even deal with him? I might as well go home and warm the Kong bed for my wife and children. Rinpoche sneered. At the same time, Li Yuanzhu came down from the mountain with Ning Qing. Ning Qing immediately cheered as soon as she came down the mountain. We are finally out. I was so stifled. You better behave yourself and don't cause any trouble. Especially when we reach Dayo, the people there may not care about me. Li Yuanzhu reminded her. How dare they? Qi Zixiao is the fourth most powerful expert in the world. You are even more powerful than her. Other than those two old fellows, no one in the world is your match. Ning Qing immediately jumped up. Li Yuanzhu shook her head and made up her mind to keep an eye on Ning Qing along the way. Half a month after Li Yuanzhu set off, Ma Hongyu called a few disciples over and instructed, "Follow me out to do something. Go back and pack your bags. We will set off in 2 days. I'm afraid there will be a fight this time, so be careful. However, this is also an opportunity for you to hone yourselves." Su Gongso and Tong Yin both brought along a few experts from their sects, but their reactions were quite different. The former was rather enthusiastic because he might be able to obtain something useful for his breakthrough this time. On the other hand, Tong Yin was completely prepared to watch a good show. If there was an opportunity, he would certainly try to fish for it. If there wasn't, he would leave and become a stepping stone for others. More importantly, as the sect leader, he knew some things and was indifferent to breaking through. These experts set off one after another within half a month according to the distance. Their destination was a hilly area in the northwest of Dayo. On this day, 2 men dressed like scholars with long swords on their backs arrived at Lan City. The people here aren't very friendly. One of the men curled his lips as he looked at the passers-by on both sides of the road. Along the way, many Aboriginal men intentionally or unintentionally bent their arms to show off their pectorals and biceps. Their threatening intent was indescribable. Not to mention their ferocious gazes. Fortunately, these people didn't come looking for trouble, so the two of them were spared some twists and turns. "Brother Ling, be careful later on," the other man whispered. "Yes, we can still escape if we are under the control of others. If we are under the control of Qi Zixiao, I'm afraid we won't even be able to escape. Let's do what we have to do," the other man said. "I'm not worried about Qi Zixiao. If we don't anger her, we won't be worried that she will attack us. Be careful of Zhao Prince Consort." "What do you mean?" "Those who use poison have dirty hearts." One of them was 28 years old and was called Du Mengyang. The other was 34 years old and was called Ling Du. Both of them were experts in Shadow Dream. Currently, there were 2 organizations among the Sword Masters. One was Shadow Dream and the other was Hidden Dream. After Qing Lian passed the news to the 2 organizations, the people from Hidden Dream weren't too interested. On the contrary, many people from Shadow Dream felt that this was an opportunity. Many of them didn't have much ambition, but they hoped to be able to make use of secular resources so that they wouldn't have to go to places where there were few people for a few decades. Chapter 893. Hey, have you heard? The #1 expert in the world has appeared and discovered the residence of an ancient deity. Inside the residence there are treasures used by that deity. Ridiculous, haven't you read too many supernatural novels? Ancient deities? You don't know about this. Occasionally, ancient treasures are discovered, and every time, it causes a reign of terror. Let's not talk about other things. It's true that the legendary sword master killed his enemies with a flying sword. Sword masters have been rare in the past 100 years. As for the specifics, who saw it with their own eyes? Are you saying that the ancients made it up? That's ridiculous. Let's not talk about other things. How can those spirit wheel experts be fake? I think you are muddle-headed from reading books. In a restaurant in Great Xia, 2 scholars were in a heated argument. Around a table not far away, a man with a long beard and a white face sat upright. Around him were 3 capable men in their 20s and 30s. A few of them were listening to the quarrel between the two. The older man looked calm and unfathomable. A few of the capable men looked surprised. "Master, how do these ordinary people know about this?" one of them asked in surprise. The white-faced, long-bearded man was Liang Hongyu. He placed the wine cup in his hand on the table and said softly, "Don't tell me you think that I'm the only one who knows about this? It's obvious that someone deliberately leaked the news and wanted to muddy the waters." "Master, could this be a scam?" a disciple asked with concern. "I can't even tell if it's a letter from the #1 expert in the world. The handwriting can be faked, but the divine intent in the words can't be faked." Liang Hongyu frowned slightly. "I don't dare. However, this matter seems to be unusual. Li Fu, who hasn't shown his face for a long time, actually sent a letter personally. I'm sure that it wasn't just for me. There must be a lot of experts who went. I don't know what he valued so much in that secret residence and who left it behind to make things so difficult for him. As for stirring up trouble, if they can stir up trouble in front of the #1 expert in the world, I will have to admire them." "Oh, It actually spread? Rinpoche was a little surprised when he heard the report. Yes, it has spread within the borders of Great Xia. This subordinate heard it from someone in a restaurant. After that, I also wanted to find out where the news came from. I investigated for 7 days but I failed. A young man stood below and said, "It's our subordinate's fault." Another middle-aged man said. The young man's name was Chen Feng, and he held the position of Baihu of the rearguard commandery. He was one of the people who delivered the letter to Great Xia. The middle-aged man was Gu Yu, the northern imperial commander of the rearguard commandery. His subordinates were the 1,000 soldiers who were being trained and prepared to be sent to Great Xia. Gu Yu's face was full of worry. If this news spreads, there will be many people who want to fish in troubled waters. I'm afraid it will affect what your highness wants to do. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows. Influence? What effect could it have? Another group of people going to watch the fireworks? He was curious as to who was behind this. To be able to spread the news on such a large scale, the other party must have used a lot of manpower. It was impossible for a major power to do so. However, the people he had chosen this time were not ordinary people. Anyone could do it. Even if it was a country or just a villa with this kind of status, there were plenty of ways to spread the news. As for the purpose of the other party, needless to say, it was to muddy the waters and take advantage of the chaos to reap the greatest benefits. However, you guys didn't expect this, right? I invited you to watch the fireworks. As for the secret residence, Rinpoche wondered if he should build a secret residence. When the time came, he might be able to catch a lot of fish. Those who dared to come and fish in such a scene were not ordinary people. Rinpoche thought for a while before picking up the letter in front of him. After taking it out, there was a white handkerchief with a string of white pearls hanging in the corner. When he opened it, he saw a line of flamboyant writing. I heard that the Empress of Dayo has 7 drops of the blood of a real dragon, which contains the power of a real dragon. It is rare in today's world and I want to take it to study and play with it. I came here on the 3rd day of the 6th month. The Empress of Dayo will definitely not let me return in vain. I'm handsome Liu Xiang. Rinpoche carefully read it 3 times. After reading it for the first time, a strange look appeared on his face. Where did this come from? Rinpoche asked as he held the handkerchief in his hand. Your Highness, it was placed on the table in my room in the middle of the night when I was staying in Yuyang City. I'm incompetent and didn't even notice that someone had sneaked into my room. If the other party wanted my life, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to come back to see you. Chen Feng lowered his head and apologized. Who is this I'm handsome Liu Xiang? Rinpoche asked with a faint smile. It should be Ghost Shadow Xian Shui. His martial arts aren't top-notch, but his lightness skills are indeed top-notch. In the past 10 years he has committed many major crimes in Great Xia. It is said that he even stole an important treasure from the imperial palace. In order to capture him, the imperial court of Great Xia sent out Lung Ran, who has been tracking him for several years, but still hasn't been able to bring him to justice. This time he actually set his sights on Her Majesty and Your Highness. We will definitely make sure that he doesn't return. However, Your Highness, you have to be careful. This person has committed many crimes since then and each time he was notified in advance. Although Lung Ran's combat power isn't top-notch, he's still a spirit wheel expert and is proficient in tracking down and apprehending criminals. Even so, he couldn't do anything to him. It can be seen that this person is indeed outstanding, Gu Yu said. However, this person actually chose to do this at this time. We don't know if he's pretending to be the messenger. The 3rd day of June was the date set by Rinpoche in the letter. It would take 4 days to travel from Lan City to the predetermined location. It wasn't impossible for someone to pretend to be the messenger to restrain the experts of Dayo. After all, the location was in Dayo. If Dayo sent out many experts, it would indeed be a big threat. However, if it was true and the other party stole something from the imperial treasury, it would be a huge loss of face. Rinpoche looked pensive, but he was thinking about another matter. The content and style of this letter were too similar. It was too much of a coincidence. Go and check if there's anyone called Gulong, Gulongshin or Gulongju, Rinpoche said. Your Highness, is there a range? Gu Yu immediately asked. Check the market of Great Xia's novel authors and see if there's anyone with this name. Or see if there's any novel with a similar plot. Rinpoche said. Yes. Well done. Rinpoche's praise surprised the two of them. They thought that they would be punished, but they didn't expect it to be a compliment. It's already beyond my expectations to be able to find so much information about Great Xia in such a short period of time. If you do a good job, You will naturally be rewarded in the future. Rinpoche said. It was impossible for the two of them to find out who might have committed the crime after receiving this letter. This could only mean that the other party had already been in the intelligence warehouse of the rearguard commandery from the beginning. Over the past few months, the others had been training, but Guyu had also sent people to pave the way and collect information on some experts. It seemed that the initial results had been seen. For example, Rinpoche had never heard of this ghost shadow before. Thank you, Your Highness. Your Highness still treats us so generously despite our incompetence. It's really frightening. The two of them bowed their heads and apologized. The credit that belongs to you is yours. I'm in charge of the rearguard commandery and also in charge of the Black Bamboo Academy and the Department of Commerce. I'm also very busy. Sooner or later, the rearguard commandery will be handed over to a capable person. Rinpoche chuckled. I will do my best to complete the task that Your Highness has given me. Guyu's expression changed slightly and immediately said, You may leave and do your best. Rinpoche nodded and let the two of them leave. Chapter 894. Du Mingyang and Ling Du were still in disbelief when they walked out of the rearguard commandery. They first went to the Black Bamboo Academy, then to the Honglu Bureau to request an audience with Rinpoche. Finally, they were taken to the rearguard commandery, in a courtyard in the corner of Beihong district. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was what Rinpoche said. Before coming, they knew from Qing Lian that Rinpoche wasn't interested in their fighting abilities. After all, the Aboriginals were a fighting race, and almost all the court officials were Cardinal Heaven experts, equivalent to Spirit Wheel experts, or even stronger than ordinary Spirit Wheel experts. Unlike the Yun Nation and Great Xia, where most Spirit Wheel experts lived outside the court, only a very small number of them would receive salaries from the court. After all, at this level of strength they were enough to dominate a region. As long as they didn't do anything that angered the heavens, no one would easily provoke them. Why should they care about others? However, in Dayo the most powerful force was the court, where almost all the Cardinal Heaven experts served. No one knew how many Cardinal Heaven experts there were in the 60,000 mountains. Even the Empress herself didn't know. Under such circumstances, why would they care about the fighting power that they could only drive with their lifespan? This was also the reason why they were tempted. No sword master liked to fight because the price was their lifespan. In fact, the reason why they wanted to leave the secluded areas was that they often encountered danger there, and every time they used their spirit swords, their lifespan would also be consumed. Therefore, even though they were Spirit Wheel experts, most of them didn't regard themselves as Spirit Wheel experts or ordinary people. They were a group of people who drifted away from society. There was no need to fight, no need to roam the wilderness all year round, no need to do messy things, and yet they could obtain the materials they needed. This was something that many sword masters dreamed of. However, Rinpoche wanted to go, which was especially incredible for the two of them. Study. Rinpoche wanted them to study and then watch their progress. He wasn't forcing them to study. They could also read through it or be good at a particular subject. As for what would happen next, according to Rinpoche, if they were qualified, they could choose to become teachers or researchers. This was something that they didn't expect. They were sent to a courtyard next to the Honglu Bureau. After closing the door, Du Mingyang said, I still feel a little strange. I also feel strange. Ling Du said. Zhao Prince Consort spent so much money to find us just for this? The Aboriginals originally lacked such people, but now that Dayo had conquered the Yun Nation, what kind of people couldn't they find? Why are you looking for us? Du Mingyang's face was full of disbelief. Ling Do deeply agreed. Although Qinglian said that he is trustworthy, Qinglian's current status might not be reassuring. We're different from them. We spend our days in the wilderness and rarely interact with people. We're not good at scheming, so we're afraid that there might be traps behind us. Since we're already here, let's stay here for a while. It won't take long. Then, let's see what he has up his sleeves, said Ling Do after thinking about it. In any case, I'm still confident in my memory. If I hadn't become a sword slave back then, I would have been the top scholar. Du Mingyang said resentfully, when I took the imperial examination at the age of 16, I had to give up everything because I became a sword slave. Sometimes I feel that being a sword slave is a curse. In reality, it wasn't just the two of them. All the sword masters were literate and well-read. After all, without extensive knowledge, how would one know where the materials might appear? As for being literate, it was the same reason. Nowadays, both the practitioners and the sword masters were all literate. If the former were illiterate and couldn't even understand martial arts, how could they practice martial arts? The first prerequisite for practicing martial arts was to be literate. In this era, they were definitely a rare group of people with a high level of education. Of course, some practitioners who hadn't even reached the man-will level and some gifted people were excluded. The Aboriginals were an exception. This was a gifted race. Your Majesty, there's something fun today. Rinpoche hugged the Empress's waist and laughed. He thought of the letter he saw in the afternoon and found it interesting. The Empress sniffled and suddenly said, "There's the smell of a woman." She glared at him and said, "I'm listening to your explanation." "How is that possible?" Rinpoche chuckled. He was always at the academy and the rearguard commandery. Where could he have met a woman? The Empress's face immediately turned cloudy. Rinpoche immediately felt that something was wrong. He quickly let go of her and gestured for her to stop. Then he jumped to the ground and began to spin in circles, thinking hard. Speaking of which, the Empress's temper had been changing these 2 days. Could it be that the secretion of estrogen after pregnancy affected even the Empress? This thought flashed through Rinpoche's mind, but he immediately cut it off and began to think hard about what kind of smell he had gotten. Logically speaking, a light touch shouldn't leave a smell, and it was impossible for the Empress to smell it. Could it be that the Empress was deceiving him? Was she becoming paranoid because of the effects of estrogen? That couldn't be, right? However, this was hard to say. I've never been pregnant before, so how would I know? It seemed like I should have a gynecologist at home in the future so that I could ask her about it. Rinpoche spread out his hands and said with a relaxed smile, "I've been at the academy and the rearguard commandery all day. The guards can testify that they wouldn't dare to deceive your Majesty." "Do you mean that you dare to?" The Empress's face began to turn gloomy. "I can't bear to," Rinpoche said gently. "Then tell me where the smell on your body came from." The Empress's eyes began to emit a cold light, and the surrounding temperature dropped. Rinpoche was speechless. How could he continue to live like this? He was more King wrong than Do-e. "I really didn't." Rinpoche was at a loss for words, and his forehead was full of sweat. He obviously didn't smell anything, but the Empress insisted that he did. This matter couldn't be explained at all. He didn't expect the Empress to suddenly burst into laughter, and flowers suddenly bloomed in the hall. "I'm just teasing you. I've been watching this scene in the past 2 days and I want to see your reaction." The Empress's face was full of smiles, and her nose was slightly wrinkled, making her look playful and cute. However, Rinpoche wasn't in a good mood at all. He was scared by the Empress and broke out in a sweat. "Your Majesty, don't watch too much television. That thing is a source of trouble." The Empress chuckled and didn't say anything. When Rinpoche came over, her eyes suddenly flashed coldly and she slapped him away. "You still dare to say that you didn't lie to me?" Rinpoche rolled on the ground a dozen times and his mind was in a daze. Then he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. "Damn it, I've been deceived." Rinpoche jumped up from the ground, tore off his coat and carefully looked at the back of it. He carefully sniffed it again and finally found some traces after a while. He carefully kept a distance of 10 meters from the Empress, even though it was only a short distance. He threw the coat to the Empress. "Your Majesty, can you see if it's 5 inches below the collar?" Rinpoche's face began to turn black. The Empress sniffed it, and a cold glint appeared in her eyes. She then suppressed it and asked, "Tell me what happened?" Rinpoche took a look. "When I left the academy today, Tonglan and Shurgan patted me on the back." "It's not the smell of Tonglan." The Empress's eyes flashed coldly. At this point, Rinpoche had already figured it out. "Tonglan was punished by me to clean the toilets because she beat up a junior student. I don't know where she got the rouge from, but she patted it on my back." This time he was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. "These 2 bastards, just wait for the 2 of you to clean the toilets until you graduate." He then looked at the Empress. There was indeed something wrong with the Empress. "What's with that look?" The Empress's face cleared up a little, and then she stared at him again. "Well, Your Majesty's look. I'm your husband. If I don't love you, who should I love?" Rinpoche's back was drenched in cold sweat again. If he were to say that she was a lunatic, this day next year would be his death anniversary. Chapter 895. When Rinpoche arrived on Earth, he asked someone to bring the 8 thick-browed, big-eyed winged cavalry warriors down to make arrangements. He also asked his assistant to arrange for a gynecologist. After waiting for 2 hours, he finally saw a bespectacled female doctor in her 30s. She wasn't old, but her skills weren't low. "Hello, have you eaten?" Rinpoche was sitting at the table and gorging himself. When he saw the person brought in by the secretary, he looked up with an inquiring expression. The doctor was stunned. She didn't expect to come in to ask if she had eaten instead of seeing the patient. This was quite rare. "I'm not hungry, thank you." "Where's the patient?" The doctor was a little reserved. After all, she had been briefed on some matters before coming. Those brought in by the assistant were all very reliable. "She's not here. Take a seat first and wait for me. I'm starving." Rinpoche smiled and continued to bury his head in his food. It had to be said that the family of chefs that he had brought in was really profitable. Rinpoche felt that he had regained his weight rapidly after coming back twice. His weight was close to 150 kilograms again. Of course, this was also related to his recent cultivation and activation of the sage mode. He would lose dozens of kilograms every time he moved and no one could bear it. The assistant brought the doctor to the living room, leaving Rinpoche to continue eating 3 bowls of noodles and a whole roasted lamb before leaving with his belly in his hands. Full. "Hello, doctor. I'd like to ask why my wife is pregnant and has been in a bad mood recently." Rinpoche's attitude was quite humble, which made the doctor feel good. After all, she was brought here from the hospital. Even if she knew that the other party's identity wasn't ordinary, she would still feel a little uncomfortable. If you want to understand the patient's condition, it's best to see the patient with your own eyes. "How long is she pregnant?" "She's been pregnant for a little over 5 months. Other than her bad temper, are there any other changes? For example, her personality, diet, or daily behavior?" Rinpoche thought for a while. "She's moody and says things that she wouldn't have said before. In addition, she's become a little suspicious." "Do you rarely accompany her?" The doctor pushed up her glasses and asked. Looking at the fierce-looking baldy in front of her who exuded a vicious aura from head to toe, she had some guesses in her heart. "I've been a little busy recently, but I accompany her every night." The doctor asked some more questions and then said, "After all, I haven't seen the patient, so I can only give a brief explanation. Generally speaking, there were several reasons why a pregnant woman would experience such a change. Physiologically, many pregnant women would have varying degrees of hormonal changes after pregnancy. For example, progesterone and estrogen would both increase, causing pregnant women to become sensitive, emotional, and prone to throwing tantrums. Psychologically, pregnant women also needed companionship. In the early stages of pregnancy, the physical discomfort brought to the pregnant women made some pregnant women psychologically unable to adapt to the change from being a wife to a mother. During this period, pregnant women were often emotionally unstable, easily angered, and more dependent. Although your wife has been pregnant for more than 5 months, it is not uncommon for some people to have this kind of change last until now. Also, the pregnant woman's range of activities is very limited, which will also make her anxious. Rinpoche nodded thoughtfully. "Don't underestimate this kind of change. It's not good for the pregnant woman and the fetus over time." "Then what should we do?" "Spend more time with her and care for her. Also, eat less spicy food and listen to more music." Rinpoche's spirits were immediately lifted. Then he suddenly thought of something. "Does her drinking affect her?" He initially thought that with the Empress's ability to control her body, drinking alcohol shouldn't be a problem. However, it seemed like it was hard to say. The doctor's eyes widened and looked incredulous. "Of course not. Even ordinary people know not to drink alcohol when preparing for pregnancy, let alone after pregnancy. Alcohol can cause fetal alcohol poisoning, destroy the undeveloped brain cells of the fetus, and cause miscarriage." Rinpoche immediately pulled a long face when he heard this, even though he already knew that drinking would affect pregnant women. "How much does she drink a day?" "No matter how much she drinks, she has to stop drinking." Rinpoche thought about it. About 2 bottles of ergo a day seemed a little too much. He had to go back and stop the Empress from drinking at least 1 bottle. By the way, there hasn't been any change in her belly after 5 months of pregnancy. Are there any problems? Every pregnant woman's situation is different. You can only know after a B scan at the hospital. After that, Rinpoche asked a few more questions before asking the assistant to send the doctor away. When the assistant returned, Rinpoche asked a question. "Is there an Eru shop in this city?" Rinpoche felt that it was time to show off his Eru skills. The Empress groggily touched her side and touched nothing. That fellow was still on Earth and hadn't returned. She opened her eyes and saw that there was a ceiling made of red gauze above the wooden bed. Otherwise, the ceiling would be too high in the hall, and she would feel uncomfortable looking at it. Although Rinpoche didn't notice much, The Empress was very familiar with the condition of her body. Naturally, she knew what kind of changes her body had undergone recently. There was a life growing in her belly and absorbing her strength as nutrients. Although the amount was insignificant to her, it was gradually increasing. This was a good thing. At least for a period of time, she wouldn't have to worry about reaching the limit of her strength. At least for the time being, she didn't want to break through. A child was still a very unfamiliar concept to her. It was as if she suddenly had such a small thing in her belly, making her feel at a loss for a period of time. The Empress rolled twice on the bed. With one less person beside her, the bed seemed a lot more spacious. She hugged the other pillow and continued to roll on the bed with a smile on her face. She felt that she was in a good mood today. Through the window of the palace, she could see the sky brightening up. The weather was good and she should take a stroll in the garden after court. After washing up and preparing to have breakfast, she suddenly felt something strange behind her. She turned around and saw Rinpochen in baggy shorts and a t-shirt carrying bags of various sizes. "What did you bring for me?" The Empress was looking forward to it. Clang clang clang. Rinpochen pulled out a set of underwear made of a few ropes from the bag. It could be said that he didn't block anything that should be blocked, and he didn't block anything that shouldn't be blocked either. "You dog." The Empress suddenly spat. "You want me to wear this?" "Actually, I can try." The Empress rested her head on the table and said, "In that case, dance for me first." "It's a little early." "Your Majesty, are you going to the morning court session?" Rinpochen laughed. "That's true. I'll let you go first," the Empress said lazily as she looked at the clock at the side. After the Empress left, Rinpochen began to assemble some of the things he brought back. One of them was a family doctor robot. It had a humanoid upper body similar to porcelain and a caterpillar lower body. Chapter 896. I'm Xiaoji, the family doctor. I've detected volatile ethanol in the air. For the health of you and the fetus, please stop drinking. Just as the Empress picked up her second cup, the strange-looking robot not far away seemed to have been switched on. Its eyes flashed red, and the tracks under its body moved slowly toward the Empress. At the same time, a synthesized sound was emitted from the robot's body. The sudden sound stunned the Empress, Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. Robots were no strangers to the academy. They were completely made of machinery, yet they could walk and talk. They had always been very popular among the students. The evidence was that they would occasionally catch students sneaking into the academy in the middle of the night to cut them into pieces. However, it was still quite fresh to Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. They found the strange thing interesting in the morning and studied it for a long time. However, they didn't expect it to make a sound while the Empress was drinking. "Your Majesty, that thing is making a sound," Hong Luan said excitedly. "Pah, crush." The Empress slapped the robot, which had just reached her side, into a pile of parts. The composite ceramic shell that could resist guns was smashed all over the ground as if it had been smashed by a sledgehammer. "There's no sound now." The Empress calmly poured the wine into her mouth. Qing Yuan and Hong Luan couldn't hide the regret on their faces. Such a fun thing was gone in an instant. That day, Rinpochen deliberately finished his other work early and wanted to go back to accompany the Empress. He first returned to Yaohua Palace, but he didn't see the robot family doctor. He immediately had a bad feeling. He asked the guard outside. "I threw out a pile of trash in the morning. It's broken beyond recognition. Are you referring to that, Your Highness?" Although Rinpochen didn't see it, he felt that it was it. Well, it seemed like there was still a long way to go for the Empress to quit drinking. "Where's Your Majesty?" "She should be in Jinghua Garden." When Rinpochen came outside, he heard the sound of a zither. He stood in place and thought for a while before going back to get his eru. "Your Majesty." Hundreds of flowers bloomed in the garden. The contrast of red and white was extremely beautiful. The flowers in the garden were taken care of by the gardener that Rinpochen had brought back from Tianjin Basin. It was indeed much better than the messy weeds that grew in the past. Not far in front of him were two ladies playing the zither. The Empress, who was holding a wine glass, turned her head and saw Rinpochen and the thing in his hand. Immediately, she became vigilant and asked, "What are you trying to do?" Rinpochen didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the Empress's reaction. "My air skills are pretty good. Killing is as easy as waving your hand. If you were born a few decades earlier and learned the right martial arts, you would be considered a top-notch figure by now." The Empress rarely praised him. "It's really not bad. I'll pull one to liven things up, Your Majesty." He felt that the Empress was biased against him. Do you believe that I will bury you along with the thing in your hand? The Empress glared at him. Rinpoche spread his hands. Prejudice was really scary. He helplessly put the arrow aside, walked to the Empress's side and sat down. The family doctor robot in the palace hall? What are you trying to say? Forget it, it's nothing. Rinpoche felt that given the Empress's current mood, it was better not to test the waters. Are you going out of the palace in the afternoon? The Empress asked while listening to the zither and drinking wine. When Rinpoche heard her voice, he felt warmth in his heart. Usually, if the Empress didn't express it, he wouldn't have realized that she actually hoped that he would accompany her whenever he was free. No, I will accompany Her Majesty in the afternoon. I haven't accompanied Her Majesty in a long time, and I always feel that the time I spend with her every night isn't enough. Rinpoche subconsciously glanced at the wine glass. He had no choice. After what the doctor had said, he had no choice but to pay attention to it. Sure enough, after hearing what he said, the Empress couldn't help but smile. Then when she saw his gaze, her face stiffened. What are you looking at? Actually, I think there's something that's pretty good. Do you want to try it, Your Majesty? Rinpoche rolled his eyes. Fortunately, he had prepared many backup plans. Sure enough, the Empress became curious after hearing this and asked, What? Qingyuan, go get the white and green boxes. Rinpoche replied. Oh. Qingyuan immediately skipped away. What exactly is it? The Empress asked. You will know in a while, Your Majesty. Rinpoche was delighted. Not long after, Qingyuan came back with a box of calcium milk. Rinpoche took one for the Empress, inserted the tube and passed it to her. He took another two and gave them to Qingyuan and Hongluan. Then he took one for himself and started drinking. It's pretty good. The Empress liked it as soon as she took a sip. Under the sun in the palace of Dayo, the Empress, a prince and two maids were drinking Waha calcium milk. Rinpoche felt that he had to ask them for advertising fees. After drinking 3 bottles in a row, the Empress took the wine glass from Hongluan and drank another glass. Rinpoche tried his best to pretend that he didn't see it and reached out to touch the Empress's belly. Slap. The Empress slapped him back, squinted her eyes and asked, What are you doing? I'm concerned about my son. Rinpoche covered his hand and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Practicing the yang quintessence had indeed greatly increased his defense, but the Empress also used more strength when hitting him. It seemed that practicing this martial art would make things easier for the Empress. Who told you that it's a son? The Empress touched her belly and snorted. A daughter is fine. Rinpoche didn't mind and smiled. The Empress was speechless. After a while she said doubtfully, That day Tuan asked me that I should be able to tell if it's a son or a daughter by now, but it's neither a son nor a daughter. Rinpoche was stunned and asked, Then what is it? It's a ball? Ha! Rinpoche was stunned. What did you say, Your Majesty? That's strange. It seems to be different from others. The Empress was puzzled at first, then relieved. However, I'm the Empress, so it's normal for me to be different from others. It shouldn't be. Rinpoche widened his eyes and said, Being the Empress is a matter of status, but the one in my belly isn't. It's a matter of race. What was going on with a ball in her belly? Your Majesty, are you really going to give birth to a Neza? Don't be so nervous. The Empress waved her hand and said, You're already a prince, so you should act like one. Don't be so flustered. No, Your Majesty, this isn't a matter of whether I'm a prince or not. Even a god would panic if he knew that there was a ball in his belly. It's nothing. Maybe the power in my body is too great for him to absorb, so he formed a ball and wrapped himself up to avoid being hit by too much power. I am a talent that has never been seen in 1,000 years, so my son should also be a talent that has never been seen in 1,000 years. The Empress thought about it. She had been thinking about this matter recently and felt that it was quite possible. However, we can't know if it's a boy or a girl like this. After listening to the Empress, Rinpoche finally felt relieved. It would be better if it was like this. If a ball fell and called him father, he wouldn't even know where his face was. Your Majesty, do you want to see a doctor? Rinpoche was still a little worried. He's very healthy. I can feel it. The Empress waved her hand. It's just that I'm a little unhappy that I can't see him. At first, Rinpoche wanted to ask the Empress about her belly being the same for more than 5 months, but he wasn't in the mood to do so now. Chapter 897. Zhuhua, stand there. Rinpoche brandished the Type 81 rifle and yelled at her in a nonchalant manner. A girl was scurrying around the campus like a monkey. Bystanders could only see a faint shadow and couldn't find her. If I stand, you will turn me into a beehive. Zhu Hua obviously wasn't going to be a fool. Seeing that Rinpochen was angry, she decided to hide first. Without looking, Rinpochen followed the sound and fired a series of bullets. Li Fu, who was resting with his eyes closed, didn't even look up. He tapped his fingers in the air a few times and a few bullets fell to the ground. You're targeting me, aren't you? If it were someone else, you would have shot them in the face. Li Fu said faintly. Pfft. Such a bad temper. Are you constipated? Not far away, a few students turned their heads to look out of a window. Principal is really scary. This classroom was filled with this year's freshmen, and they obviously weren't used to Rinpochen's excellent education habits. A young girl stuck out her tongue and said, "It's all right." Of course you think it's all right. Principal is always kind when he sees you. If you put more effort into your exams, he definitely won't be fierce to you. Zhang Kaixian squinted and smiled. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Another series of gunshots rang out. Shurgan, who was walking out of the Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute, looked in the direction of the school, smiled and said, Yagüe has been very anxious recently. The gunshots that hadn't been heard for a while had been heard frequently in the past 2 days. However, this sound is really nostalgic. These are the scars of a man. Du Laolu, who had somehow slipped out, took off his shirt, and some faint marks could be seen on his body, which were particularly conspicuous under the sun. He had been hung up the most in the past few years. Tong Lan, who was sitting on the wall, sneered. It's obviously because you are stupid, okay? Du Laolu couldn't be bothered with Tong Lan, or rather he was too lazy to look for a beating. He turned to Shurgan and asked, Do you think this internal combustion engine can replace manpower like Yagüe said? Why not? The steam car has already explained everything, but it's still too big. If the internal combustion engine is shrunk, we can see what we want. The biodiesel was much more efficient than black coal and charcoal. I'm looking forward to seeing the streets filled with the things we've created and seeing their surprised expressions. Once the internal combustion engine is manufactured, we can graduate. Du Laolu said after thinking for a while. Yes. Shurgan heaved a sigh of relief, his gaze calm. That's hard to say. I heard that when the time comes, there will be 2 choices. One is to continue to study, there will be more knowledge to learn, and the other is to be released to fill in the various departments. Some people will probably stay. Of course, those who aren't smart should hurry up and graduate. Tong Lan threw this sentence on the wall and disappeared without a trace. Shurgan smiled at Du Laolu. She doesn't have any ill intentions. I know, it's just that her mouth is a little smelly. Du Laolu waved his hand. Having known her for more than 3 years, he naturally knew what she was like. Besides, she was still young. Even if he didn't take into account her young age, he still had to take into account the size of her fist. Where are we going to find the world's #1 expert? In Lan City, 2 young women dressed as Taoist nuns were walking on the street with their horses. The younger of the 2 turned her head and asked, This is Qi Zixiao's place, so we have to pay our respects to the owner first. We can ask her about Li Fu. Li Yuanzhu looked at the pedestrians and the shops on the side. In fact, there was a simpler way. She just had to release her aura and it would be immediately detected. However, given Li Yuanzhu's character, she naturally wouldn't do such a high-profile thing. The 2 of them entered the city and went straight to the palace. The 2 of you in front, stop. The palace is a forbidden area, and you are not allowed to approach. The 2 of them were stopped before they reached the palace gates. Hey, tell your empress that my senior sister is here. Ning Qing bared her fangs and brandished her claws like a fox. Li Yuanzhu was that tiger. Li Yuanzhu glared at her, stepped forward, cupped her fists and said, Li Yuanzhu from Great Xia requests to see Deyo's empress. Do you think you can see Her Majesty whenever you want? Go to the Honglu Bureau and report your identities. If Her Majesty wants to see you, she will naturally summon you. That guard obviously didn't remember Li Yuanzhu's name. Although Li Yuanzhu was the 3rd most powerful expert in the world, she was still too far away from them. Hey, my senior sister is... Ning Qing's eyes widened, but she was covered by Li Yuanzhu before she could finish her sentence. The latter smiled at the guards and pulled her away. Senior sister, they actually asked you to report to the Honglu Bureau? Qi Zixiao is too arrogant. They don't even know who we are. Their attitude is already beyond my expectations. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. According to the description of the Great Xia people, the aboriginals were extremely ferocious and overbearing. Although these 2 guards were a little vulgar, they had a good attitude, which surprised her a little. Then, are we just going to go to the Honglu Bureau obediently? Ning Qing was somewhat unwilling. Go and find that person. Li Yuanzhu said after some thought. That person? That scoundrel from before? Ning Qing's face turned red when she recalled their encounter a few years ago. That scoundrel actually said that she and senior sister had small breasts. It's been a few years and you still haven't forgotten? Li Yuanzhu had long been indifferent to that matter. Anyway, it's passed down from your ancestors. Don't mind it too much. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. Passed down from my ancestors? What do you mean passed down from my ancestors? Ning Qing was stunned. She then reacted and was immediately embarrassed. Senior sister. She then gave up on herself and said, I have a flat chest that's passed down from my ancestors. So what? She turned to look at Li Yuanzhu and said, Senior sister, you aren't any better than me. Li Yuanzhu smiled and didn't say anything. In fact, she didn't care about this kind of thing at all. She just happened to use it to bully Ning Qing. It was easy to find out where Rinpochen was. The two of them had just arrived at the academy when they saw a black shadow flitting across the wall and disappearing. Li Yuanzhu saw it clearly. It was a girl who was about 16 or 17 years old, wearing clothes made of animal skin, and she stuck out her tongue as she ran. The two of them then asked to see Rinpochen, and things went much smoother this time. Rinpochen had an idea after listening to the description of the attire. It was about time for Li Yuanzhu to arrive. Rinpochen calmed himself down and went to welcome her. After all, she was the third most powerful expert in the world and he had to show her the proper attitude. He saw two pretty girls in Taoist robes standing there. They had met once 3.5 years ago, and it seemed that time hadn't left any traces on them. She was still as flat as ever. It's about time for the two of you to arrive. Rinpochen had no intention of hiding anything. He looked at Li Yuanzhu and exclaimed, You're still the same as 3 years ago. You're still so untainted by the secular world, which is admirable. The other two almost didn't recognize him. Ning Qing opened her small mouth and couldn't help but ask, How did you become like this? Although he was a little wretched back then, he was still quite delicate. Look at him now. Rinpochen touched his head and laughed. I've become bald and stronger. The two of them obviously didn't understand this joke. Li Yuanzhu smiled and didn't say anything. Ning Qing only noticed Rinpochen's aura at this moment and was slightly surprised. She couldn't tell that this person was at least at the earth wheel level. She then looked at herself and pouted, feeling a little upset. We just met. Li Yuanzhu thought about it. She should call him Your Highness, but she wasn't from Dayo. Calling him Young Master didn't seem like it. Call me fellow Taoist. Rinpochen laughed. Identity didn't mean anything to the other party, so it was better to call her fellow Taoist. Hey, are you also a Taoist? Ning Qing was surprised. Chapter 898. Buddhism? Li Yuanzhu thought for a moment, but she had never heard of such a sect. On the other hand, Ning Qing's face fell. It was over. This guy actually believed in an evil cult. This kind of people was the most annoying. Each and every one of them was like a lunatic. Rinpochen led the way for the two of them and casually said, Your Taoist sect teaches that from nothingness, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, and 3 begets all things. Buddhism talks about emptiness. Emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Taoism emphasized dual cultivation of life and death, cultivating one's heart and tempering one's nature. Buddhism focused on cultivating one's nature and not on cultivating one's fate, focusing on understanding one's nature. What the Taoist sect sought was a seamless pagoda that was self-contained and without any gaps. The Buddhist sect cultivated the leakless fruit, which allowed one to pass through all leaks. In reality, the two of them cultivated different techniques, but in the end they reached the same goal through different means. Although Rinpochen only remembered that he was a Buddhist when he used it, he still had a deep understanding of Buddhism. That Heart Sutra had helped him not to collapse due to the endless deaths over the past few years. Although he had only read this one book, it would naturally surface in his mind whenever he was on the brink of death. His understanding of Buddhism was not shallow. If the little monk had heard his words, he would have shouted Arhat again. Li Yuanzhu's eyes lit up when she heard that. From what he said, Buddhism was the complete opposite of Tao. One was alive, the other was empty. One cultivates one's heart and tempers one's nature, while the other can see one's nature clearly. One from nothing to something, the other from something to nothing. This immediately piqued her interest. However, whether this Buddhist sect was an orthodox sect or not, she couldn't tell just from this point alone. Those evil sects usually spoke in a very pleasant manner. What is the purpose of Buddhism? Transcend the self. How do I transcend? Find yourself. What should we do? You are Buddha, I am Buddha, she is Buddha, and all living beings are Buddha. If you can find that bit of Buddha nature in yourself, you will naturally be Buddha. That's why the Buddhist sect says that the heart must see one's nature, and that is to see Buddha nature. Then what is Buddha? Buddha is the forerunner. Ning Qing, who was listening at the side, was confused as they exchanged questions and answers. Buddha is the forerunner, so why are all living beings Buddha? Since all living beings are Buddhas, why do they need to cultivate Buddhas? It was obviously a load of nonsense. The more Li Yuanzhu asked, the more energetic she became. Her aura was different, and her eyes were filled with understanding and doubt. Thank you for clearing up my doubts, fellow Taoist. She cupped her fists at him and asked, May I know where Buddhism originated from? Are there any classics in the sect that I can read? After chatting with him for a while, she had a good impression of him. At the very least, he didn't look as frivolous as he was last time. Although he wasn't very ambitious, he was still quite something. Especially from the first few sentences, it could be seen that the other party also had a good understanding of Taoism. One had to know that the influence of Taoism in Great Xia was not that great. Furthermore, there were many branches of Taoism within Great Xia. Naturally, its influence was limited. There are millions of Buddhist believers, and there are even some in Tianjin Basin. As for the scriptures in our sects, we do have them. However, if you feel that the Taoist deities are the best in the world and the Buddhist scriptures state that Buddha is supreme, don't get angry because of the conflict between the sects, Rinpoche said rather casually. Ning Qing moved her lips. Nonsense. There were only hundreds of millions of people in Great Xia. Could it be that everyone in Great Xia believed in Buddha? Li Yuanzhu's eyes flickered. She also thought of this problem, but she didn't say much. Rest assured, fellow Taoist. In that case, I'll get someone to make a copy and send it to you in a few days. Rinpoche inexplicably thought of a saying. Fellow Taoist, please stay. I think you are fated with Buddha. If this Taoist nun became a nun, she would be quite pretty. A rather strange smile appeared on his face. Li Yuanzhu suddenly felt that this person beside her seemed to be up to no good and subconsciously distanced herself from him. She changed the topic and said, The two of us came here to pay our respects to the owner of this place, but we ended up getting shut at the door. I think the guards don't know the two of you. Why don't you wait here for a while? I'll get someone to inform them later. Thank you for your trouble. There's another thing I want to ask Zhao Prince Consort. May I know where Li Fu is? Li Yuanzhu asked again. Li Fu? Rinpoche looked around the courtyard, pointed in a certain direction and asked, Over there. Rinpoche saw an old man with messy white hair and beard squatting on the ground and digging a hole. He seemed to be making a fire. There were also a few things called sweet potatoes that he had seen recently. Liar. Ning Qing immediately shouted. Li Fu, the world's most powerful expert? Li Yuanzhu asked faintly. She wanted to tell him that she was looking for Li Fu, the world's most powerful expert. However, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. His aura was restrained, and he looked no different from an ordinary person. It wasn't normal for such a person to appear here. Furthermore, well, it didn't matter. Furthermore, Li Yuanzhu just felt that he was no different from an ordinary person. Is there such a big difference? You can't even recognize him in person? Li Yuanzhu couldn't take it anymore. She turned to look at Rinpoche and saw that he was watching the show. She had no choice but to look at Li Fu again. She frowned for a moment before gradually relaxing her brows. She walked to a few meters away from Li Fu, cupped her hands and said, Li Yuanzhu from Zhen One Temple greets Senior. Li Fu used his finger to drill into the wood a few times. The moment his finger left the wood, a flame sprang out of the hole in the wood. He then looked up and said, You're too polite, little girl. The person looking for you is that fellow, and it has nothing to do with me. Li Yuanzhu suddenly realized that she had been deceived. That letter was actually written by Qi Zixiao. However, she didn't get angry and simply asked, Why are you here, Senior? I'm old and just trying to make a living. That fellow has a lot of interesting things in his hands and I'm waiting to see them. Li Fu lowered his head and continued to make a fire to roast the sweet potatoes. If anyone else saw the world's most powerful expert, they would definitely be unwilling to leave. However, Li Yuanzhu stood in place and thought for a while before turning to walk toward him. In fact, she was still a little curious as to why Li Fu was here, but since he didn't want to say, she wouldn't force him. Was the letter written by Qi Zixiao? Li Yuanzhu looked up at him with a pair of clear eyes that seemed to be able to see straight into his heart. Didn't you swear that it was definitely written by the world's most powerful expert? Ning Qing whispered. Li Yuanzhu glared at her. Whose side were you on? However, she really didn't expect Qi Zixia to actually do such a thing. It doesn't matter who wrote it, but the matter isn't fake. What do you know about the origin of the human race and the foreign races? Ren Baqian asked. Nothing. Li Yuanzhu shook her head. Ren Baqian felt relieved. He was really afraid that it would be like the last time he spoke to Li Fu, where he would be rebuked as soon as he opened his mouth. Finally, there was someone who didn't know. Although Li Yuanzhu was the third most powerful expert in the world, she was still young and usually stayed in the Taoist temple all year round. As such, she really didn't know much about these things. Come in and take a seat. Ren Baqian returned to the office and waited for the two of them to sit down before saying, the reason why I wrote you this time is related to this matter. Liar. Ning Qing muttered again. Ren Baqian didn't care and continued, the human race came from the south of the 60,000 mountains where there are many ancient races. Back then, the human race was defeated, and less than 100,000 people survived and migrated here. Some of them specialized in physique cultivation and stayed in the 60,000 mountains to guard against enemies. This is the origin of the Aboriginals. Liar. Ning Qing shouted with her eyes wide open. This story is too outrageous. Li Yuanzhu was also shocked. What's the use of lying to you? Ren Baqian spread his hands and continued, Li Fu knew about this. For him, there was no difference between Great Xia and Deyo. However, he knew about it before I did. Then why did he tell you? Li Yuanzhu was puzzled. Why didn't Li Fu tell others about this but told Ren Baqian? There were many experts in Great Xia, but she had never heard of this matter. He wished he could bury this matter in his stomach for the rest of his life. Do you know why the experts from 100 years ago disappeared? Ren Baqian chuckled. They're all dead. Su Wuming killed them. That's because those people wanted to find an opportunity to break through and wanted to go out and take a look. This is the barbaric land which is different from the outside world. It lacks some things, so it's almost impossible to reach a higher level of strength. Just look at how many experts have opened up the heaven and earth region since ancient times. However, opening up the heaven and earth region isn't unusual in the outside world. Chapter 899. First of all, I'll say that I don't believe in Buddhism. If I say that I believe in shamanism, do you believe me? They're not shamans or anything like that. They're Chuma immortals. We have quite a few of them here. He had seen all kinds of strange things, so he was more or less skeptical, but he would rather believe it. I've only been to a monastery once in my life. It was when I was writing Abbot. I wanted to see what the inside of a monastery was like. Then burn a hole in his clothes while burning incense. That's quite a tragedy. Why do I know something about Buddhism? It was in the previous book. I wanted to write about a graceful flowery monk like Gulong's Wuhua, but in the end, I had to look up information on Buddhism when I was writing, right? After looking around and communicating with some of his book friends, he gained a better understanding of Buddhism. He realized that many things were not as he had imagined. In the end, the main character turned from a fake monk to a real one. Actually, I used to hate Buddhism. When I looked at Buddhism, I also hated Buddhism. However, people like Monk Wuhua couldn't be hated. This was the charm of the characters written by Gulong. To be honest, most readers don't know much about Buddhism and Taoism. It's everyone's freedom to hate Buddhism, hate this religion, and hate that religion. Hating Buddhism is a personal feeling and no one can interfere. But if you want to scold me because of this matter, you should have a valid reason. There were a lot of dark Buddhism in online novels and many people felt that it was true. As for why I said so much when I don't believe in Buddhism? Who would be happy to be scolded for no reason? If you were scolded for no reason, you would also get angry. It was fine if the scolding was reasonable, but the scolding was baffling. Just because of this, I was threatened and cursed by a group of people. How could I not retaliate? This time it was what the ancients said, an eye for an eye. Firstly, many people say that Buddhism cultivates the afterlife, while Taoism cultivates the present. In reality, Buddhism focused more on cultivating one's present life, while Taoism had its own ways to cultivate the afterlife. Why was there such a big misunderstanding? The main reason was that the Pure Land sect, which was the most widely spread, was aimed at ordinary people, the toiling masses. In the past, they could not even read a word. How could they be taught about the afterlife and cultivation methods? Why do people say that Taoism has a high threshold? Isn't it here? Secondly, some people say that Buddha will bless you. Go look for whoever said so. Buddha was not a god but a human, a forerunner. After passing on what he comprehended to you, the next step would be karma and karma. Saving you is the same as Buddha saving the fated one. Not to bless you. From a Buddhist point of view, everything in the world was fabricated. Why would they bless you? Since it was all fabricated, what was the point of blessing? *T he was completely deified. As for slandering Buddha, the Zen sect still had people who slandered Buddha. Third, the boundless treasury. This should be the earliest charity event in the country, right? During the harvest period, the commoners would offer some offerings. During the years of disaster, the monasteries would lend those offerings to the commoners at low or even zero interest. To be honest, it was a survival policy. However, it was not uncommon for a good scripture to be misread in the wrong direction in history, right? In the end, it became a black dot. Fourth, don't get married. The Quanjin sect doesn't allow marriages either. It's just to cut off some distracting thoughts. Why didn't they scold him for Real? Fifthly, when Buddhism is flourishing, Taoism is ascending the mountain. In troubled times, Buddhism is ascending the mountain and Taoism is descending the mountain. He did not know where this nonsense came from on Baidu. To be honest, Buddhism had contributed a lot to the country and the people, such as the Ming dynasty's resistance against the Japanese pirates and the Sino-Japanese War. If that was the case, the number of Taoists who came down from the mountains to rebel during the chaotic times was not small. Sixth, Taoism is not Taoism. Don't get it mixed up. If you really want to talk about the national religion, it should be Confucianism. However, Confucianism disappeared at the beginning of the 20th century, probably around the time of the May 4th movement. Seventh, the one who was deceived by a monk. If you were deceived by a civil servant, would you still hate the founders of the country? Eighth, Buddhism came from India. Newton was even an Englishman. Didn't I see that you hate gravity? Ninth, don't give birth. It seemed that all religions were like this, right? There was nothing to say. Let me give you a scientific explanation. Let's talk about these first. In fact, there are many things that are completely different from the truth. Lastly, it doesn't matter if you hate Buddhism. But if you vent your anger on me because of this matter, at least you have your own reasons. After writing so much, it's more than half a chapter. Chapter 900. What Rinpoche said was like a fantasy story to them. In comparison, the novels on the streets were much more realistic. Some books that made people blush with embarrassment didn't count. You'll know the specifics when we enter the palace. Rinpoche briefly explained the situation. He mainly talked about the conflict, defeat, and agreement between the human race and the foreign races. After that, he talked about the foreign races that they had encountered in the 60,000 mountains. Li Yuanzhu listened calmly, but her heart was in turmoil. After a while, he composed himself and sighed, "It's really amazing. For such a big thing, I have to verify it myself. That's why I said it's in the palace." If he wanted to confirm more, he could only head to the 60,000 mountains. However, that will have to wait for a while. I will show you a big treasure in half a month. Rinpoche laughed. Li Yuanzhu and Ning Qing felt a little strange when they heard what he said. However, the former still nodded slightly in agreement. It didn't take long for the messenger to return, and Rinpoche brought both of them into the palace. The empress sat at the seat of honor in one of the side halls. She leaned on the armrest and held a waha in one hand. Rinpoche felt that his hard work was still effective. The empress was used to drinking. In fact, those kinds of alcohol couldn't make her drunk. Now that she had drunk a lot of waha, she didn't drink as much alcohol. Yesterday, Rinpoche saw that 1/3 of the wine bottle was left. In other words, the empress had only drunk slightly more than 1.5 bottles. He felt that this was a huge improvement. "Your Majesty." Rinpoche cupped his hands and walked over to the empress. "You are still as graceful as ever since we parted." Li Yuanzhu cupped her hands at the empress. The empress sat on top and looked down at Li Yuanzhu. Felt pretty good. However, he couldn't mistreat someone who stood shoulder to shoulder with him. "Men, take a seat. The people below didn't recognize you just now. Please don't blame them," the water empress said lightly. When the two most powerful women in the world met, there wasn't much conflict. Previously, Li Yuanzhu didn't take advantage of the empress when she was extremely weak and even sat down for a chat. This made the empress have a good impression of her. He also owed her a favor. Otherwise, a mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers even if there were 2 tigresses. "That letter was written by me. I thought it was interesting. To be able to deceive you, the 3rd most powerful expert in the world, is indeed interesting. However, if it weren't for that, it would be rare for us to meet even though we are thousands of miles apart. The Water Empress said frankly. It's indeed a little unexpected. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. When she first came in, the hall was still a little cold, but after a few words, both of them had smiles on their faces. Call me by my name. It seems like you don't know how to address me. Calling me Your Majesty isn't suitable for a person like you. Just call me by my name. This was the first time the Empress allowed someone to call her by her name. I won't stand on ceremony then, she said immediately. What have you seen and heard along the way? The Empress asked. This is somewhat unexpected. Compared to the current situation in Great Xia, it is much better. Although it was poor, the people were passionate. I've heard some things along the way. I can tell that Dayo will become even more prosperous in a few years. However, I don't know about the situation in the Yun nation. I know what you want to say. The Empress waved her hand and said, Did he tell you? The Aboriginals are one with you and I treat them as my people. As long as they don't anger me, I will let them live in peace. That's for the best. Li Yuanzhu smiled and said, On behalf of the people of the Yun nation, I thank you. The people are my people and you don't have to thank me on their behalf. How I treat them will be known in the future. That was rude of me. Li Yuanzhu's expression didn't change, but Ning Qing was indignant. If it wasn't for the fact that this was her first time in a place like the palace and she was affected by the atmosphere, this girl would have jumped up. I don't mean anything by this. You are a kind-hearted person. It's not appropriate to say that you are broad-minded, but it's good to say that you are compassionate towards the people. The Empress chuckled. Seeing that the two of them were talking harmoniously, Rinpoche was relieved. He was really afraid that they would go against each other. After all, they were women. Your Majesty, let's go take a look at the underground palace first, Rinpoche said after the two of them chatted for a while. Oh, let's go then. Lead the way. As the Empress said this, she got up and walked down with Rinpoche. When they arrived at the original location of the palace, the ground had already been flattened, and a large hall was built on top of it with bricks and tiles. However, it wasn't over yet. After entering the hall, they could see a staircase leading downwards on one side. This is the place. Rinpoche picked up a torch from the side and led the way down. What is this place? You will know in a while. As they walked through the passageway, Li Yuanzhu looked at the map on the wall beside them but couldn't see anything. However, the white jade under their feet surprised them a little. The feathered snake that had turned into ashes at the front gate was put in a bag by Rinpoche and sent back to Earth. Unfortunately, no results were found. After entering the gate, the scene before them suddenly unfolded. The stone bridge, the earthen spring water that was emitting cold air, and the glass cover that stood erect on the ground that looked like an isolated island. That person's skeleton had been covered by the glass cover. It looked like a museum, but Rinpoche had no intention of collecting entrance fees. Rinpoche stepped onto the bridge and walked forward without stopping. Before long, Li Yuanzhu, who was behind him, suddenly stopped moving. Senior sister? Ning Qing immediately noticed her abnormality. Sure enough, the man-wheel level can't be seen, and the earth-wheel level is the basic level. Rinpoche nodded. Unfortunately, we can only see it once. What kind of mechanism is this? Only first-timers can see it? Rinpoche was a little curious about this matter. However, the Empress couldn't answer this question. Earth's current technology couldn't do anything about this kind of spiritual thing. What did you do to her? What happened to my senior? Ning Qing glared at them. Don't be impatient. Rinpoche pressed his hand down. Don't worry, I just saw something. In less than 10 seconds, Li Yuanzhu suddenly moved, raised her hand and pointed at the air. The air was visibly cut open by this finger. After pointing, Li Yuanzhu took 3 steps back. Her eyes became clear and she looked around cautiously. She saw Ning Qing, Qi Zixiao and Rinpoche looking at her in front. She immediately reacted and said, What I saw just now was the scene from back then, Rinpoche said. It's really amazing. Li Yuanzhu nodded slightly and sounded solemn. Rinpoche turned to look at the corpse in front of him and said, This is the senior of the human race from back then. Li Yuanzhu walked to his side and cupped her hands as a form of greeting. Seeing that her senior was fine, Ning Qing was relieved and asked curiously, Senior, what did you see? I saw our ancestors fighting for the survival of our race. Li Yuanzhu replied softly. After seeing the illusion, the rest was easier to handle. After returning to the hall, Li Yuanzhu asked, Do you want to return to that world? She was talking to Qi Zixiao. It's mine. Of course I have to take it back. The Empress took it for granted. There's no hope of success. If I do as you say, it will only bring disaster. That will depend on my big baby. Renbachien laughed. The Empress glared at him. Li Yuanzhu couldn't tell, but she who had experienced the TV dramas on Earth could tell. Ouch, 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 ouch. Renbachien's face turned pale. The Empress pinched his waist and Renbachien gasped. Li Yuanzhu looked at their little actions. Although she wanted to laugh, she was more worried. Renbachien straightened his face and said, "The two of you should stay in Lan City for the next few days. We'll talk about it after half a month." That's settled then. Li Yuanzhu nodded. This was the only way. In this way, the first piece of the puzzle that Renbachien was waiting for had been put together. With Li Yuanzhu around, it would be much easier to deal with the experts of Great Xia. In addition, if Su Wuming appeared, he would need her to help him block him. Let's talk about the problem of water. In fact, there wasn't really any water. Did you see the scenery that I described? How many words did I use? To describe the scenery and characters in hydrology, it was also a dialogue with water. A lot of things that seemed insignificant were actually useful. I can't keep pushing the main plot and then make patches later on, right? For example, some readers feel that the industry on Earth isn't necessary, as long as it's a skill tree and a nuclear bomb. I'll just say the simplest one. 100 years in Dayo is 300 years later on Earth. Perhaps the interstellar era has already begun. At that time, Renbachien would want a nuclear bomb. At that time, they would already be in the universe and would be confined to the small area of Earth. If Renbachien and the Empress didn't have some power, who could they deter? Let's talk about Buddhism. Is it inexplicable? I think that a temple plus 30 degrees of stability is still useful. Furthermore, it has a lot to do with the character of Li Yuanzhu. If it really has nothing to do with her and doesn't affect the later stages, it can only mean that the plot of this character has been abandoned. Chapter 901. Gather in front of the palace at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning and set off with the team. Dismissed. Renbachien waved his hand, and the students immediately jumped out like alpacas who had let go of their reins. That's right, they jumped up and down. He still had to bring a group of students with him to set off the fireworks this time. Renbachien was constantly deepening the impression in the minds of these students about what they were learning for and what they could do. Renbachien didn't want them to run away and become officials. Although the imperial court of Dayo lacked such officials who had undergone basic education, he lacked them even more. He turned his head and saw the two sword masters standing in the distance. He greeted them with a smile and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting. Your Highness, you are too kind." The two sword masters were polite. "Have you finished reading? How was your harvest?" Renbachien looked at the two sword masters. This was what he was most concerned about. Other than chemistry, everything else was all right. One of them said. Other than biology. I got angry when I heard that humans were transformed from monkeys. Could it be that my ancestors were monkeys? Who is that Darwin? I must let him know the price of talking nonsense. The other sword master said angrily. The two of them didn't look depressed. In fact, Renbachien had already told them to pick what they were good at and liked. Darwin. I wonder if his coffin is still there. Renbachien thought for a while. It would be very difficult to let him know the price of talking nonsense. In fact, Renbachien had already gotten someone to revise the current teaching books twice and erase a lot of knowledge about Earth. Ordinary people wouldn't think of going to another world after reading them. However, these were all trivial matters. Renbachien was more delighted. The two of them had brought back a lot of books. In addition to a dictionary that was written in simplified Chinese in this world's font, there were elementary school mathematics all the way to first-year algebra geometry, second-year physics and chemistry, and first-semester biology. It was already very impressive that the two of them were able to memorize so much content in a month. It's a good thing that the two of you have gained something. It just so happens that I'm going out of the city tomorrow. Please answer a few questions for me so that I can know your situation. Renbachien suddenly laughed. Please ask, Your Highness. Come to the office. Renbachien brought the two of them into the office, flipped through the previous test papers and marked out a few questions for them. 10 fill-in-the-blank questions for each subject were worth 40 points, and 6 short-answer questions were worth 60 points. After 2 hours, Renbachien looked at the examination papers that the two of them had handed in with a look of delight on his face. Both of them scored above 80 points on average. Within a month, Renbachien was able to score more than 80 marks in a few subjects. This was simply beyond his expectations. It could be confirmed that these sword masters had an unimaginable talent in learning. Congratulations to the two of you. Rinpoche smiled. Looks like we passed. Both of them laughed. Now we can talk about the specifics. Rinpoche said as he returned to his seat. What the two of you have seen so far is only the knowledge that 13 or 14-year-old teenagers have learned in my plan. It's just a small part of the ocean of knowledge, like a small river, the kind where the water doesn't even reach one's knees. The two of them raised their eyebrows in surprise. They learned these things very quickly, but they also knew that most of these things were beyond the scope of a scholar. For example, the so-called elementary school textbooks were fine, but most of the algebraic geometry at the back was beyond what a scholar could learn. Not to mention the physics and chemistry. There is still a lot of knowledge to learn. I hope that you can learn more profound knowledge and then use this knowledge as the basis for doing things. Whether it's doing research or being a teacher, the time limit is 20 years. After all, this knowledge can't be easily spread. If you want to leave before the time limit, the price will be huge. I believe you can understand. Of course, I will also give you sufficient rewards. Abundant supplies, a stable life, and the materials that you need. In addition, as long as you can give me what I want, money, beautiful women, and power, I can also satisfy your needs. Learn the civil and military skills and sell them to the imperial family. Whether it's Great Xia or Dayo, it's the same. Your Highness, with all due respect, Lan City isn't the goal that we thought it would be. Even if the two of us are willing, others might not agree, Du Mingyang said. They didn't care about other aspects, but they wanted to live the life that they wanted in a prosperous area and not spend the rest of their lives in a poor place like Lan City. Do you see those street lights? Rinpoche pointed outside. These street lights are really amazing. The two of them were very impressed. Even the capital of Great Xia couldn't be brightly lit all night. In fact, apart from those few streets, the capital of Great Xia was also shrouded in darkness. However, although those street lights could bring light, Lan City lacked too many things. You don't have to worry about this. As long as we have 5 years, the prosperity of Lan City will reach a level where people can live for the rest of their lives. After all, this is the capital of Dayo, and those street lights are just the beginning. There are a lot of vendors coming and going, and there are enough supplies to make people live a befuddled life. We can set up a 5-year agreement. If Lan City doesn't reach a satisfactory level within 5 years, your place of living will be moved to the Yun Nation, where you can have everything you want. Before that, there will always be a price to pay if you want to live the life you want. 5 years isn't a long time, Rinpoche said calmly. He was very confident about this matter. The two of them looked at each other and felt that this condition was indeed acceptable. Furthermore, they had learned that Lan City had indeed changed a lot in the past 2 years. These included the street lights, the clock tower that amazed them, and the various items sold in the royal shops that couldn't be found elsewhere. It wasn't impossible to say that Lan City would reach a fairly prosperous level in a few years. As for the fact that the aboriginals weren't friendly enough, the two of them didn't care. From some of the information they received, the people in front of them had put a lot of effort into this. At the very least, the people of the Yun Nation and the Jing tribe could walk freely on the streets now. The two of them believed that these things would change. We will only sign a contract with you, not the imperial court. The two of them raised another point. Rinpoche nodded. Sure. He understood their concerns. After all, he wasn't an aboriginal, so they could naturally trust him on some things. However, they didn't have much confidence in dealing with the aboriginal barbarians in the imperial court. Your Highness, how many people do you need? The more the better. It would be great if all the sword masters treated this place as their home. I can only say that I'll do my best. Besides, we need to go back and contact the others. If that's the case, I hope that you won't reject my men. As far as I know, the opinions in your organization aren't unified. Your choices may affect a group of people, and not everyone will be happy with your choices. My men are mainly responsible for your safe return. Rinpoche said after pondering for a while. Thank you, Your Highness. The two of them looked at each other and said. Although Rinpoche's actions weren't necessarily without the intention of monitoring them, his words weren't unreasonable. Rinpoche was in a good mood when he returned to the palace. The performance of the two of them had confirmed his thoughts. With this group of people, many things would be much easier in the future. These were more than 100 natural-born academicians. In such an era, such a group of people could play a huge role. If he were to abduct more than 100 academicians from Earth, how big of a role would they play in this world? Even if they were limited by their foresight and knowledge, their talent was their greatest strength. What others needed decades to learn, they could learn in a year or two. After that, they would be able to play a huge role. Moreover, dealing with these two spirit wheel sword masters would open up a gap, and it would be much easier to deal with the rest. Another piece of the jigsaw for his future plans had been put together. Chapter 902. Before setting off, there was one more thing that needed to be arranged. It was Shui Liuxiang. From the collected information, this person's actions were rather strange. As a result, it wasn't certain if he was the one who sent the letter. Whether it was or not, the palace had to make preparations. If the true dragon blood was really stolen, it would become a joke. With so many experts, the Empress would probably fly into a rage if a thief could come and go as he pleased. The true dragon blood was taken out and placed in a separate palace with guards outside. This was to tell the thief that it was here to prevent him from sneaking into the inner treasury. It was said that this person only targeted his targets and wouldn't touch anything even more precious beside them. From this point of view, the thief was probably stealing to show off. Otherwise, a normal thief wouldn't be dismissive of a priceless item beside it. In addition, the thief had been in Dayo for more than 10 years without failing. Furthermore, he was still free and unfettered even after being hunted by the number 1 super arrestor. This was certain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a big name for himself. As a result, even though there were many experts in Lan City, Rinpoche still didn't dare to be careless. There weren't many traps set up in the palace. After all, those traps had probably been used by many people. Previously, he had committed so many crimes that others had probably used all the necessary methods. In addition to the layer of guards and ex-anja outside the palace, there were densely packed infrared alarms inside. The purpose of the alarm was under the table where the true dragon blood was placed. The Roaring Emperor and more than 20 high-powered amplifiers in the entire palace. With the volume of the Roaring Emperor and the 20 ship amplifiers, it was enough to make the other party endure 240 decibels of sound in that instant. Under the heaven and earth splitting domain, even a deaf person would be unable to take care of himself for the rest of his life. A rocket launch was only 150 decibels, which could make an ordinary person permanently deaf or even die. An ordinary volcanic eruption was only 180 decibels. A sound attack of 240 decibels. Rinpoche doubted that he would be able to see an intact corpse when he returned. For this reason, even the guards outside the palace stood far away. Remember, as long as someone passes through the infrared, no matter who it is, you have to play your part. Rinpoche patted the Roaring Emperor's head and exhorted it. Well done. I'll find you a man-will female mole. Rinpoche promised. If you don't do it well, then say goodbye to your little dick. Whether it was humans or beasts, coercion and bribery were equally effective. You may leave. Rinpoche moved the stone slab under the table, revealing the tunnel dug by the Roaring Emperor. There were also alarms and loudspeakers inside. After leaving the main hall, Rinpoche warned Exenger again, no one is allowed to enter the main hall these days. Anyone who disobeys will be executed. Yes. Exenger was still a person of few words. What if he enters the hall? Let him in. You guys stay outside. When the time comes, get someone to use a hook to hook him out, lest his corpse stinks. Back at Yaohua Palace, the Empress placed a piece of paper on the table. Upon seeing Rinpoche enter, the Empress pouted at the table and said, "The name list is over there. There are quite a number of people who have revealed themselves in the north these days." As expected, Rinpoche said as he picked up a piece of paper and scanned through it. All of them had names on them. There were about a dozen people from the top 10 to the top 100. These people didn't hide their tracks and swaggered into Dayo's territory. Rinpoche folded the paper and stuffed it into his pocket. Li Fu's deterrence isn't strong enough. The number 1 expert in the world is asking for help, but there are actually so many people who dare to fish in troubled waters. Since the number 1 expert in the world is asking for help, it can be seen that the benefits and difficulties are huge. Under such circumstances, there will naturally be people who are strong enough to come forward. If it doesn't work, they can just go back. However, it will only take 2 to 3 months. Can Li Fu kill them all? If he succeeds, you have to know that it takes many years of hard work to improve a little after reaching the spirit will level. Who would be willing to give up the opportunity to soar? The Empress said lazily. That's true. Rinpoche nodded. What the Empress said made sense. If he was stuck in one place and couldn't make any progress even after many years of hard work, he definitely wouldn't give up if he knew there was such an opportunity. Seems like there might be more fish than expected. This was a good thing, but there were too many people, so he had to select them first. He didn't want to smuggle a few people in. The night passed. The next morning, the winged cavalry was ready to set off outside the palace. A total of 2,400 Earthwheel experts, including the Minister of War Qin Chuan, the Minister of Works Tong Jinye, the Minister of Justice Zhui Yan, the Minister of Rights Xiong Yaohe, the Minister of the Army, the Imperial Judge, the Ordnance Officer, the Military Weapon Officer, the Imperial Judge, the Examination Officer, and more than a dozen other Cardinal Heaven experts, including Qin Chuan, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of War, the Minister of Ordnance, the Minister of War, 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 the Minister of War. Only the head of the supervisory department, Tai Yin, had brought the people from the supervisory department and the two sword masters to Great Xia. The rest of the people who had nothing to do in Lan City were all there. Apart from that, there were also more than 100 third and fourth year students. Li Fu Qingyun Sword, Zhuo Cheng from Tianjing Basin's Lingshan sect, and Li Yuanzhu were sitting in a few ox carts not far away. Ren Baqin originally thought that she would choose to go by herself. After all, going with the team from Dayo would more or less affect the Truth One Temple. He didn't expect her to be so calm about it. Everything can be seen. If things are as you say, what does it matter what they think? If everything you said is a lie, I will naturally get it back. Why should I care about what others think? The number 1, 3rd, and 4th experts in the world, plus 2 Spirit Wheel experts, more than 10 Cardinal Heaven experts and 2,400 Earthwheel experts. Ren Baqin wanted to take a group photo with this team. It wasn't easy to gather so many people. However, after thinking that there might be more people in the team when they returned, he decided to put the opportunity to take a group photo until later. After the Empress and Ren Baqin's carriage left the palace, the entire team filed out from the west gate and headed northwest. Before long, Ren Baqin jumped into Li Yuanzhu's carriage, opened the curtain and asked, "Jinren, do you want to play, fight the landlord?" "What?" Li Yuanzhu, who was sitting cross-legged, opened her eyes with a puzzled look. "Do you want to play cards?" "Play cards? Great Xia also has a type of card game, right? It's similar to that, but the game is a little different." "Thank you, Zhao Prince Consort. However, I haven't done my homework for today, so I won't be accompanying you." Li Yuanzhu closed her eyes after she finished speaking. Ren Baqin shrugged. He originally wanted to take out the 5 Taoist temples in the Yun nation to bet on the Truth One Temple. Li Yuanzhu was really a boring person. He turned his head and saw that the Empress didn't like the rest of the people. Forget it, he would go back and play 5 in a row with the Empress. Forget it, I can't even beat the Empress. I can't beat her in chess either. I can try military chess. Chapter 903. They really left. Not long after the Empress and the others left the city, someone laughed in an inn in the city. The person who spoke was a man in his 40s. His appearance could only be described as ordinary, the kind that couldn't be found in a crowd. With a wave of his hand, a mirror appeared in the air in front of him. The surface of the mirror rippled like water being blown by the wind. The man took a step forward and passed through the mirror. However, if anyone was present, they would definitely be shocked. The person who passed through the mirror was a middle-aged man who was about 1.7 meters tall, thin, and had an ordinary face. However, the person who walked out of the mirror was a bald, short-bearded man who was 1.9 meters tall, majestic. There were few people in Lan City who didn't know the identity of this man. He was the Minister of Justice, Zhui Yan. This Zhui Yan waved his hand, and the surface of the mirror changed from rippling to a mercury-like mirror, reflecting his appearance. After observing this person for 10 days, I didn't expect him to leave with Qi Zixiao. However, it's good that it's convenient for me to do things. He left and then came back, so it's easy to find an excuse. I'll walk around with this person's appearance for a few days. Qi Zixiao has been in the limelight for the past 2 years and has killed many experts. However, I took the blood essence of a real dragon and made her lose face. Zhui Yan revealed a strange smile in front of the mirror. He then opened the window and looked around before turning into a shadow. Half a day later, Zhui Yan entered the Ministry of Justice through the West Gate with Her Majesty's oral edict. There were many forests and hills in the barren mountains, but the soil wasn't good, so it couldn't be used as a pasture. It was also close to Dayo, so it had always been uninhabited. "Master, there are so many people." A 13 or 14-year-old beggar jumped onto a rock and said, His dirty face had a pair of distinct black and white eyes, and his every move seemed weird. There was obviously no one in the surrounding 50 kilometers, but this little beggar said there were so many people. An old beggar with white hair and beard lying on a rock laughed and said, "There are indeed a lot. Ma Hongyu of rivers and mountains, Su Gongso of palm, Lin Dong of righteous sect, Du Qian of cloud-covering hand, Xiao Linyue of jade wave, old devil of blood sea, Taoist priest white cloud, Gao Yi of spear, Gao Yi of long and short spear, law of words, Tao Chen of fire snake." The little beggar counted with his fingers. If there are only a few dozen people within 100 li, it will be a barren mountain. However, if there were so many people within a radius of 50 kilometers, it would be a little crowded. It wasn't just crowded, it was bustling. Moreover, they didn't come alone. Just yesterday, Blood Sea Old Devil and Fire Snake Tao Chen had even fought. "Master, are you going to snatch things from these people? Are you nervous? If you get beaten up, I won't be able to carry you. I've really doted on you all these years for nothing." The old beggar rolled his eyes. "My butt hurts." The little beggar rubbed his butt with a bitter face. "Who asked you to sneak out to watch the fight between Blood Sea Demon and Fire Snake yesterday? I'll have to find another disciple if the aftershocks come." The old beggar snorted. He then said, "I'm just here to watch the show. As for the treasures, whoever wants to snatch them can do so. There are still 3 days left. Looking at the time, those barbarians should be here by now. This is their territory, so why wouldn't they come? When the time comes, I'm afraid there will be a chaotic battle. If the situation isn't right, you'd better be smart and run as fast as you can." "Don't worry, master. If they don't look carefully, they won't be able to see me at all." As the little beggar spoke, his figure flashed and landed under the rock. He twisted his body and looked around. There was no one there at all, only a withered tree. "Don't show off that little trick of yours. Even your grandfather can't do anything about the aftershocks, let alone you." The old beggar snorted, then turned his head to look at a mountain not far away. This was the only mountain within a radius of 50 kilometers. Although it wasn't very tall, it had the best view. However, there wasn't a single person on this mountain that had the best view. That was the position of the world's #1, Li Fu, by everyone's tacit agreement. People would only go there after he appeared. As far as he knew, Maruyu, Su Gongso, and Lin Dong received the letter this time. As for the others, they were just here to watch the show like him. Of course, if there was a chance, these people wouldn't hold back. After another day, the old beggar, who hadn't moved for 3 days, suddenly turned over and looked in a certain direction. "Master, someone is coming. There are quite a lot of them. They should be the barbarians," the old beggar said. After a full hour, some black dots appeared in the distance, and after another 2 hours, those black dots finally came closer. There were thousands of people, and among them, there were more than a dozen tyrannical auras that crossed the sky and pressed down on them. "How impressive." The old beggar snorted and didn't retreat. A gust of wind rolled up around him, and his aura soared into the sky. 1, 2, 3. A total of more than 20 auras soared into the sky and contended with the tyrannical auras that were pressing down on them. These people were also top experts among the spirit wheel experts. Other than the large sects like Jingtian sect, which had slightly more people with 2 or 3 spirit wheel experts, the rest occupied their own positions. However, at this time, when the auras of both sides collided, a gust of wind rolled up in the sky, and even the clouds in the sky dissipated. The little beggar, who was standing at the side, was forced to retreat by the old beggar's aura. His eyes shone brightly as he said, "With so many experts fighting across the sky, it's really a big scene." Renbachin stood in the carriage and looked into the distance. Even he could feel the tyrannical auras and the silent collision in the sky. "Your Majesty?" Renbachin turned to look at the Empress. "It's enough to let them know that I'm here." The Empress wasn't interested at all. "I just want to know what's going on with those flags." "Which?" Although Renbachin asked, his eyes drifted to a few flags in the group. "Thousands of years. Unifying the world. The sun rises in the east. Only I am invincible." The Empress glared at him and asked, "Do you think I don't know who Dongfang Bubi is?" "Your Majesty, don't you think that Dongfang Bubi is a little similar to you? Except for the fact that he's a man. But at the same time, he has the spirit to conquer the world. Besides, these flags are just for fun. I admire this person, so I won't argue with you," the Empress said faintly. "My Ren family's 72 paths golden spear has been unrivaled in the world." Renbachin boasted. The Empress sneered. "Until I met your Majesty. Rinpoche's tone changed. The empress dragged out her voice and asked, "Tell me, who are your opponents?" "In fact, I have been sharpening my spear at home for more than 20 years and have never unsheathed it. Ordinary people aren't worthy of my 72 paths golden spear." Rinpoche suddenly looked embarrassed. The empress snorted and said, "Pass the order to go up the mountain." As more than 2,000 people went up the mountain to set up camp, Qin Chuan, Tong Jinye, and the others also restrained their auras. However, Tong Jinye and the others had demonstrated enough, but the experts in the distance were dissatisfied. They knew that the aboriginals were overbearing. However, they didn't even go up the mountain, yet they dared to go up? More than 20 auras suddenly pressed down on the mountain. The empress's eyes flashed coldly and said, "How dare you?" An aura that seemed like it could pierce through the sky met them head-on. "Your Majesty, please calm down." As the empress's aura collided with everyone's, another aura that was like the sea came in between them. "Li Yuanzhu." The empress snorted. "Li Yuanzhu?" The experts in the distance were shocked. Chapter 904. The fact that Li Yuanzhu was among the aboriginals shocked many experts in the area. They couldn't understand why Li Yuanzhu was with them. Fortunately, Li Yuanzhu wasn't with Qi Zixiao. Instead, she didn't help either side. There must be a reason for this. Although this surprised everyone, it wasn't too shocking. Night passed. The bonfire on the distant mountain peak was brightly lit, but the experts in the dark were uneasy. Some people began to secretly contact the aboriginals after seeing so many experts, but there were very few of them. Everyone present was a hero and didn't care about this. The next morning, hundreds of cavalrymen came down from the mountain peak. They were divided into more than 20 teams and went to different places. "Sect Master, someone is coming for us. There are 5 of them and they seem to be the winged cavalry." On a hill, unlike the others who were camping in the wilderness, there was a white tent. A man wearing a white cloak sat on a chair, surrounded by 2 men and a woman. Below him were more than a dozen disciples dressed in red. They should be the messengers. Lin Dong, the sect master of Jingtian sect, was a handsome man in his 30s or 40s. He was gentle and elegant. However, his eyes were extremely frightening, and the whites of his eyes were almost invisible. Why did Qi Zixiao send the messengers? An old man stroked his beard and asked in surprise. "Sect master, can you guess what Qi Zixiao sent?" A woman in purple with a mole at the corner of her mouth asked with a smile. "Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao are traveling together. Maybe Li Fu is also there and invited us over for a chat." Lin Dong said with a chuckle. "How is that possible?" The old man was surprised again. It was already very surprising that Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao came together. How could Li Fu? It's hard to say, it's hard to say. Another effeminate man waved his fan and shook his head. "You only know how to say it's hard to say. What can you say?" The old man said angrily. It's hard to say too." The effeminate man didn't care and continued to shake his head. The old man was called Zuiqi, the Lanling Blade, and the feminine man was called Yunzhongyu. There was also the jade-faced fox Su Jiaojiao who was dressed in purple. These people were the higher-ups of the righteous sect. They were the head hall's law enforcement elder and the left and right messengers. Not long after, someone came in with an arrow. The letter was tied to the arrow. Lin Dong opened the letter and scanned through it. Immediately, his eyes became like black holes without a trace of light. It was as if there was only a black hole in his eyes. As expected. From the moment I received the letter, I felt that there was something strange about this matter. As expected. "Sect Master, what did the letter say?" Su Jiaojia asked. "See for yourself." With a flick of Lin Dong's finger, the letter slowly floated towards Su Jiaojiao as if it was being carried by something. "Where are they?" Lin Dong lifted his head and asked. "Have they left?" "Cult Master, they shot the letter to the tent and left." "Eh?" "Li Fu was actually in Qi Zixiao's army. He even invited us up the mountain for a chat?" Su Jiaojia was shocked after reading the letter. "What?" Zuiqi couldn't help but snatch the letter. He immediately raised his head and said, "Cult Master, there must be a trap." "It's hard to say, hard to say." Yun Zhongyue shook his head. "Are you going to go against me today?" Zuiqi was furious. "It's hard to say, hard to say." Yun Zhongyue continued to shake his head. Suddenly, his entire body became shorter, or rather, his head suddenly disappeared. It almost shrank into his chest, avoiding the sudden flash of the saber. "Everyone stop!" Lin Dong shouted. Zuiqi immediately withdrew his saber and said, Cult Master, this matter is a little strange. If it's me, just ignore them. Cult Master, do you think Li Fu is there? Su Jiaojia asked. Since Li Yuanzhu is there, Li Fu should be there too. Lin Dong said calmly. Cult Master, what do you know? Su Jiaojia looked at Lin Dong's expression and felt that the person in front of her might know something. This god's secret residence was a scam from start to finish. Their target is not the secret residence of God, but us. As for those people outside, most of them are just innocent bystanders. Lin Dong said. No matter how big her appetite is, she won't be able to eat it all, right? Besides, we have no enmity with her. Zhuoqi immediately said. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. You? Zhuoqi glared at him again. Cult Master, shall we go back? No, let's go tonight and see what tricks they are playing. Lin Dong's expression was still calm. Only now did a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Master, what should we do? They have issued a letter of challenge. The little beggar asked with a smile. What letter of challenge? This is an invitation. The old beggar immediately knocked him on the head. It's called an invitation, but isn't it still a letter of challenge? Why don't we just run away now? Anyway, you are shameless and naturally don't care what others think. The little beggar's words were somewhat sincere. The old beggar pondered for a long time before sighing. My curiosity? I already knew that I would die here one day. Your Majesty, how many people do you think will come tonight? Rinpoche sat on a rock with the Empress in his arms. What's there to guess? The Empress replied faintly. Life has to be a little more interesting. Rinpoche laughed in her ear and then blew a breath into her ear. In the distance, Ningqing pointed at the two people on the rock and shouted, These two are too arrogant. They are actually hugging each other in front of so many people. It's so sour and I have goosebumps all over my body. Senior, don't you think so? Senior? Ningqing turned her head and saw that Li Yuanzhu was staring at the two people in a daze. Senior sister, are you in heat? Ningqing looked worried. Li Yuanzhu gave her a backhand slap on the head. I'm wondering what their backup plan is. Li Yuanzhu said faintly. Won't we find out tomorrow? That being said, it's inevitable that I'm a little curious. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. After all, human strength is limited. I can't think of anything that can move people like Li Fu and the many people outside the mountain. However, they look very confident and aren't worried at all, so I'm a little curious. Anyway, they won't tell you, right? Ningqing spread her hands. So, don't think about it. You and I will point at those two people together. In broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of thousands of people, they don't seem to be ashamed at all. Li Yuanzhu rolled her eyes. For people like them, what did other people's gazes matter? Besides, they were husband and wife. In the evening, the winged cavalry warriors on the mountain began to retreat down the mountain, leaving only dozens of bonfires and a few tents on the mountain. Rinpoche took a few iron awls and roasted some meat over the bonfire. The meat was brought from the palace and had been frozen along the way. It was just the right time to use it, and the aroma of the roasted meat could be smelled soon. Hey kid, you have done so many things in my name, but I don't want any benefits from you. Just give me half of the meat. Li Fu smelled the aroma from afar, and his stomach kept growling. In a few flashes he landed beside Rinpoche. Are you the world's most powerful expert, Li Fu? I didn't expect to see you today. Mahong you. A clear male voice rang out from the darkness. Then, a man in a black robe walked out from the darkness. I'm Su Gongso. Greetings everyone. After that there was no more sound. Li Fu waved his hand and said, What world's most powerful expert? That's what you call me. I'm just an arrogant person. Oh, I didn't know that you were so self-aware. Rinpoche laughed as he sat in front of the bonfire. Kid, nothing good comes out of your filthy mouth. Li Fu immediately scolded. Why don't you spit it out for me to see? Rinpoche laughed. Lin Dong from Jingtian sect is here. 4 people appeared with a piercing sound. For the next hour, people appeared from time to time. I'm Lin Yu. Greetings everyone. I'm Bai Yun. Everyone is early. TSK. I'm Shuai. I'm Gao Yi. Around the dozens of bonfires, there were at least one or a few figures standing or sitting. After announcing their names, they didn't speak again. Rinpoche estimated the number of people while waiting for the time to come. There were a total of 19 people who emitted their auras yesterday, but only 17 groups of people had arrived. No one appeared until the appointed time, and Rinpoche knew that those 2 groups probably wouldn't come. As the time was up, Everyone's eyes began to fall on Li Fu, waiting to see what kind of tricks would be played tonight. I invited everyone here today mainly to show you a treasure before everything starts. Renbaqian chuckled. Who are you? A man suddenly asked. Renbaqian looked at him. If he remembered correctly, this person was Su Xianxian, the chief of Luohua sect. He was ranked 23rd on the list of experts and was one of the top 3 experts in the world. He's Zhao, Prince Consort of Deyo. The Empress's voice came from the tent as she slowly walked out and read. I've never heard of him. Su Xianxian said contemptuously. You're courting death. The Empress's face turned green as she instantly appeared beside Su Xianxian. However, Su Xianxian suddenly shattered into countless white petals. Following which, a loud laugh was heard. I originally had some respect for the world's most powerful expert, but I didn't expect him to be an ignorant fox exploiting the tiger's might. I won't be accompanying you anymore. Your Majesty, don't chase after him. Why get angry at a dead man? Renbaqian chuckled and stopped the ashen-faced Empress. He then looked at the others and asked, Is there anyone else who wants to leave? Is it Li Fu or you who is in charge of this matter? Me? Deyo? You can say so. Li Fu, Li Yuanzhu, do you have anything to say? Everyone immediately looked at the two of them. Especially Li Yuanzhu. Li Fu had always been famous, but very few people had seen him. Although he was the world's most powerful expert, everyone was more concerned about what Li Yuanzhu had to say. After all, she came with the Aboriginal team, and it would be a joke to say that she didn't know anything. Chapter 905. Everyone, the world's number 1 expert, Li Fu, and number 3 expert, Li Yuanzhu, are waiting here. Can't you wait one more night? Renbaqian smiled and didn't explain. There was no way to explain. When the time was up and the treasure was thrown out, they would naturally know what to choose. Facts were always more powerful than words. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, we will see the results. If you have anything to say, you can say it later. Are you the one who caused this? Many people looked angry. They didn't expect so many people to be deceived by someone who wasn't even a spirit wheel expert. I'm the one who caused this. Do you have any objections? The Empress stood beside Renbaqian and narrowed her eyes. The cold glint in her eyes swept across the field, and the chill on her body wreaked havoc. It was as if she would immediately kill anyone who dared to say no. Qi Xiao, even if you are the Empress of Deyo, you have deceived so many of us. If you don't give us an explanation, let's see how you are going to deal with this, someone immediately shouted. Just as Renbaqian said, Li Fu, Li Yuanzhu, and Qi Xiao were all waiting here. Everyone knew that something big must have happened. Otherwise, Li Fu and Li Yuanzhu wouldn't be waiting here quietly. Although the other party wasn't an expert, the fact that he could make them wait here with Qi Xiao showed how important this matter was. Furthermore, everyone had traveled thousands of miles, so how could they not even wait one more night? They were just a little angry after realizing that they had been fooled. Renbaqian smiled strangely and said, I will naturally give you an explanation for this matter, and I guarantee that you will be satisfied. However, I would like to remind everyone that it's best to evacuate the people within the 50-kilometer radius of this place. If anything happens, don't blame me for not reminding you. Awkward silence. Everyone was silent. A moment later, an old beggar disappeared into the darkness. This person was Gluttonous Duke, ranked 29th in the world. Leader? What kind of trick are they playing? Zuiqi whispered. Let's just keep watching. Lin Dong sat by the fire. Let them withdraw 25 kilometers away. Leader, are you really going to listen to him? Zuiqi was surprised. There's nothing to lose by listening to him. If they couldn't give a satisfactory answer by tomorrow morning, many of the people present would probably explode. However, from the looks of it, there's no chance for it to flare up. Lin Dong laughed softly. Everyone present had sharp eyes and ears. Even though Lin Dong's voice was not loud, it was clearly heard by everyone present. As Zuiqi accepted the order and left, several more people disappeared into the darkness. Next, everyone waited. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning. Renbaqian stood up and immediately attracted the attention of many people. Renbaqian walked straight into a tent, took out a walkie-talkie and said, Send the things over and do as I say. Then he returned to his seat and held the walkie-talkie in his hand. Many people looked over. Just now they saw him talking to this thing, but they didn't know what it was. However, no one asked. This matter could be investigated in the future. The Empress sat beside him. The two of them leaned against each other and didn't say a word. The rest of the people were even more silent as they were deep in thought. The night passed just like that. Before dawn, everyone who had left returned. When the first ray of light shone through the sky, everyone opened their eyes and looked at Rinpoche. There was scrutiny and curiosity in their eyes, but most of them were calm like the surface of a lake. The time was up. Next, it was time to see what kind of explanation this person could give. The mystery was about to be solved. Why did Li Fu and Li Yuanzhu appear here? What exactly was going on? Rinpoche got up from the ground, stretched in front of everyone, picked up the walkie-talkie and asked, "Are they back yet?" They just arrived at the foot of the mountain. A buzzing sound came from the walkie-talkie. "Bring up the blue boxes, 1 red box and 3 green boxes. Open the other boxes on the spot. Everyone get ready." After giving his instructions, Rinpoche looked at everyone and said, "Everyone, it's about to start. It's better to make some preparations before then. Otherwise," Rinpoche didn't continue. In any case, it was about to start and it was useless to talk too much. If someone really wanted to look directly at the explosion of a nuclear bomb, they could only pray that their eyes were strong enough. In fact, for ordinary people in this range, radiation and dust contamination were fatal. However, for practitioners at the earth wheel level and above, it didn't have much of an impact. Their bodies were strong enough to withstand it. Not long after, boxes were carried up one by one and opened. In one box, there was a set of equipment made of metal that included a screen and a few buttons. There were also 8 antennas erected beside it. This was a controller that could reach a range of 50 kilometers in this world where there weren't too many radio interference. In the red box, there were dozens of masks with black lenses for the eyes. In the green box there were some white coats. Compared to the previous miniature warheads, Rinpoche was well prepared this time. Everyone put them on. Rinpoche first picked up the mask, turned around and put it on the Empress's face. Then he picked up the white coat and put it on her. "What are you doing?" Everyone looked at him coldly. "Do as I say if you don't want to be plagued by all kinds of diseases for the rest of your lives." Of course, there may be someone who is willing to be a negative example and show you the consequences of not taking any precautions, Rinpoche said in a relaxed tone. She first followed Rinpoche's example and covered herself and Ning Qing. Rinpoche glanced at her and felt that he should give her an award for the best actor. Li Fu smacked his lips. This kid was actually so cautious this time. It seemed like this was no small matter. This kid had always been using crooked methods, so it was better to listen to him. Rinpoche did the same thing. Only then did everyone silently pick up the masks and white coats to check, and then put them on like him. "Is everyone at the foot of the mountain ready?" Rinpoche picked up the walkie-talkie and asked. "Those things are all put on. All students, this is the last lesson for year 4 and also an important lesson for the rest of the students. Next, I want to show you what a human can achieve. I want to show you what you have learned and what you can do," Rinpoche said slowly into the walkie-talkie. Many students at the foot of the mountain heard the voice coming from the walkie-talkie and looked at each other. They already knew what they could do. However, seeing that Yagüe was so serious this time, everyone felt that this might be extraordinary. On the mountain, Rinpoche pressed a button on the remote control beside him and stared into the distance. Everyone looked over one after another. In the distance, an incomprehensible anomaly appeared. A sun that had just appeared on the edge of the horizon jumped out of the Earth's surface in an instant. Chapter 906. Whether it was in the past, present, or future, the sun would never change. That was what everyone thought. However, at this moment, everyone saw the edge of the sun jump out in an instant. Such a change caught everyone off guard. Then, everyone realized that it wasn't the sun, but a huge light and heat that spread from a single point and filled their entire field of vision. Even though they were wearing masks, everyone felt a slight sting in their eyes. His skin, which was not covered by his clothes, could feel the heat coming from afar. Then there was a huge roar that sounded as if heaven and earth were being split apart. In an instant, everyone couldn't hear anything else. What followed was the vibration under their feet. Or rather, the entire world was shaking. Violent air currents blew from afar, bringing with them a large amount of dust that spread in all directions from the center of the explosion. A huge pillar of fire rose into the sky, expanded in the air, and formed a towering tree made of flames. No one present could speak. Everyone looked at the scene in the distance, their faces drained of color, and their brains lost the ability to organize words. Even Li Fu's fingers were trembling slightly. Even he could feel his own weakness in front of such a scene that could be considered the power of heaven and earth. Li Yuanju's indifference was finally shattered by this terrifying scene, and her face was full of disbelief. Everyone on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain stared blankly at the scene, feeling the power brought by the air currents from afar with their bodies. The ground was shaking and the wind was blowing. However, no one could hear or see anything other than the fireball in the distance. Li Fu, Li Yuanju, Ma Hongyu, Lin Dong, Su Gongso, White Cloud Taoist, Blood Sea Old Ghost. Every one of them had a resounding reputation and was looked up to by everyone. However, at this moment, when they saw the apocalyptic scene in the distance, everyone who was shocked by the scene felt a shudder from the depths of their hearts. What exactly was this? What exactly was this power that seemed like a god's wrath and could destroy the world? Qin Chuan, Tong Jinye, Zhuyen, Feng Ho, Lian Liang. All the aboriginal experts looked into the distance in horror. Was this what Zhao Prince Consort wanted them to see? It seemed a little familiar. When Zhao Prince Consort sparred with someone previously, there was an explosion at the end. In the eyes of the crowd, that was not a small amount of power, but compared to the current situation, it was not worth comparing at all. It was like comparing a firefly to the sun. That time, it was at most an all-out attack from a spirit wheel expert. This time, however, it was an attack that could destroy the world. Tong Lan's small body was wrapped up tightly. The tremors on the ground caused the surrounding stones to jump up and down. The strong wind blew on her body, but she couldn't feel it at all. The delicate little face behind the mask was completely lifeless at this moment. Not only her but the other students also felt the same way. Although the things that Rinpoche came up with had repeatedly refreshed their understanding, this time, it was simply terrifying. This was beyond the scope of human power, alright? This was... After racking her brain for a long time, she still couldn't figure out what it was. There was only one question in her mind. What they had learned, would they end up like this? For several minutes, the drastic change between heaven and earth lasted for several minutes. In the end, it turned into a mushroom cloud in the sky, informing everyone of the truth of what had just happened. The thousands of people on the mountain were silent. No one moved and no one spoke. It was as if everyone had been frozen. Rinpoche looked at the scene in the distance and sighed in his heart. Sure enough, explosions were art. If it wasn't art, then the yield definitely wasn't enough. If a yield of 470,000 tons was already this powerful, then what about 7 million tons, 47 million tons, or even 470 million tons? What would it be like? No matter what kind of creature it was impossible to survive under such power. Of course, the prerequisite was that the other party could be hit. He looked around and saw that everyone was standing there like statues that had been petrified by Medusa, maintaining different postures. The Empress was the first to recover after Rinpoche. After all, she had been frightened by this thing in the past. I've finally seen this scene. The Empress couldn't help but exclaim. Back then, he had only seen the video on TV, but he could already feel the destructive power through the TV. Now that she was watching it up close, she realized that the power was 100 times stronger than what she had seen on television. When everyone finally regained their ability to think, they looked at the mushroom cloud in the distance and thought about what they had just seen. A sense of fear rose from the bottom of their hearts. What was that just now? Someone swallowed his saliva and asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it woke up the people around him. Everyone turned their heads to look in the direction where Rinpoche was, but they saw nothing. Rinpoche and the Empress were nowhere to be seen. When they turned their heads again, they realized that the two of them had returned to their original positions and were sitting shoulder to shoulder. Li Fu was silent, and his eyes were filled with shock. She forced herself to regain her composure, but she couldn't hide the horror in her eyes. Su Jiaojiao had long turned pale, and her body was trembling slightly. "Everyone, please take a seat," Rinpoche said faintly as he held a cup and gently sipped the cold water. This time, no one had any objections. What they saw in front of them had already occupied their minds. What was that just now? Gao Yi, who was holding the spear, was a man with a face like a stone statue. At this moment, his eyes were still filled with shock. "It's a big treasure." Rinpoche sighed. "I have already said that I would show it to everyone." After saying this, Rinpoche frowned, his face twitched, and he turned to look at the Empress. He gritted his teeth and said, "It hurts. Can you be gentler? Did you do this?" Lin Dong raised his eyebrows. At this moment he seemed to be the calmest person in the group. "What else?" Rinpoche asked. Everyone fell silent again. The scene just now had given them too much of a shock. Now that they heard Rinpoche say that he was the one who did this, they couldn't believe it at all. They would rather believe that this was the secret residence of a god. Rinpoche looked at the silence and knew that he had to strike while the iron was hot. He chuckled, picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Send the other little treasure up." "What do you mean?" Everyone understood Rinpoche's words subconsciously, but they simply couldn't believe that Rinpoche still had this thing. After coming back to their senses, they found it even more unbelievable that Rinpoche actually threw this thing on the ground for them to see. One had to know that this was the power to destroy cities and countries. Even if it was thrown into the capital of Great Xia, it was guaranteed that not a single tile would be left. However, Rinpoche lured everyone here and used this thing just to scare them? How was this possible? This could only mean that this thing wasn't precious, at least not to him. Or perhaps he had a bigger plan. In that case, how much of this thing did he have? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.